If you're good, I'm good. Okay, so 6:01 PM, I'll call to order the Community and Business Relations Committee. Present are trustees Ursink and Kudo. Trustee McGovern is out of the country and I believe trying to get in. And so if and when he arrives, we will welcome him. But the only order of business is to consider policy 48, the volunteer committee expenditures. Village Manager Ewald, if you could walk us through it, please.
So pardon me.
Are the mics on?
Hello?
Hello.
That sounds good.
Sorry, I was
Yep.
too far.
Yep. Okay.
We're on the last of three policies that kind of are around contributions or donations and how things work. And so the last one before you on this topic is to consider policy 48, volunteer committee expenditures. And what this does is it lays out the process for volunteer committees of the village who may also receive contributions from the Shorewood Foundation, which is primarily the only foundation that, at least since I've been here, have seen contribute towards a volunteer committee effort. So it aligns the process of how to do that. This is also important because the members of the foundation change. So you have volunteers in the foundation board that will pass the torch to the next person in one of their positions. And they're also needing guidance in terms of how to contribute if a contribution is made. So this just really states what we currently do. But what I've noticed is that I'm continually reverbalizing to the new people in the different positions. And so it's probably just easier if we lay it out. So minor, because this is what we do in practice, but I was hoping that all of you could read it as first-time readers and ask me any questions or let me know what if there's any gaps or any questions that you may have had, so that, because I'm reverbalizing on it pretty frequently over the course of the last couple of years. So you're going to be my best gauge and as to whether it makes sense to you from the viewpoint of a volunteer committee member. And then also put yourself in the role of a new president on the Shorewood Foundation, if they want to know how it will work.
Trustee Ursink, do you have any questions?
It's pretty straightforward to me. I really don't have too many questions. I mean, this is going to be a fairly new policy, right? I mean, this is something we're just starting now.
Well, we've been doing it in practice.
We've been doing it in practice. Okay. But this is going to be
for many years.
Okay.
We started to formalize that within the first 2 years of being here. There were some challenges with contributions that are being made. So that's when I kind of got engaged in the process. And so this is what we have been doing. So it's not new in practice, but the policy in a written format is new.
Could you maybe review some of those challenges and how this policy reflects the challenges that you may have had?
I think at the time it was more so the village, if there was a given project, a group saying from a volunteer committee standpoint, oh, okay, we're going to solicit contributions to fund it. But the municipality may have already been issuing payment for services to help create the project, but yet the whole thing wasn't necessarily funded.
Yeah.
So that would be an example. So we don't want to be in a position where we're financially paying for something that's, and more so that it comes into the bailiwick of, is this a core service? Usually our volunteer committees aren't responsible for core service payment function because they're volunteers.
Yeah.
But, it kind of helps create that line of separation just so everyone knows what to expect from each other. And the Shorewood Foundation has an ability to pay directly. It's actually like for many, I guess for a period of time, the village would request reimbursement from the foundation. The foundation would review, cut a check for the village. Then the village receives the check, cashes the check and then pays the vendor, when really it's, you just pay the vendor.
Yeah, why?
Yeah.
Okay.
That and the foundation funds aren't necessary, they're not the villages. They've been raised for a particular purpose and execution point. So it also just streamlines it a little.
You have any other additional questions? Just sort of two quick things. One, I know that it's briefly described in the policy under purpose, but is there any concern that folks will find number two, the expense should support the administration of volunteer community activities? Is there, as opposed to administration, just leaving it a little bit vaguer, more vague, the expense should support volunteer committee activities? I mean, the administration of it just seems like the expenses support the staff liaison
Oh,
or like
no,
that administrative.
not at all.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just tactical. Like if they're, and
Like you said, tents or
well, Estherbrook Park, there's a
Permits or-
rental fee,
Yeah.
right? So that committee puts together Pollinator Palooza. They look to go rent the park. We, on their behalf, submit our certificate of liability insurance. We complete the application. We pay that. I don't know. I can't remember what the dollar amount, like $50, let's say, on behalf of the committee. But it is not any form of administrative staff.
okay. That is the only part I found a little confusing or could be
Okay.
confusing for folks.
So just, do you think it'd be clear if I deleted administrative?
That's what I would do. The
Okay,
expense should support volunteer committee activities. You know, whether it's administrative or otherwise, or what, when they come back to the village, depending on policy 21, they will be told whether it's okay or not okay, or what the process is. I just don't want them thinking that they're paying the village to administer the thing.
got it.
And then I definitely had a second thing here, but Trustee Lynn doesn't have a mustache and completely threw me off.
Oh,
Oh, I thought it was I thought there was strangers walking in here.
just a little bit.
Oh, so the funds are available starting January and they're first come, first serve.
Well,
How does that,
not necessarily.
Okay.
We know what a committee's activities are going to be going into the next year. That's why
Okay.
we, go through that initiative process and what people are working on. There is a core, it's a minimal amount. There are some things that we know about. The committee actually most active has been conservation because we've been, it's the license purchasing for the rights to show films. The, Estherbrook Park example, or when people submit for Bird City USA or things of that nature. So we typically know what's coming. And so we have a chance to look at that and be like, oh, okay.
the only concern I have there is there are some committees that are probably more active, like conservation, than others. And I just, like in the outside world, there's, grant making, and then there are periods where grants are available, and they'll have cycles. My only concern was that the way this reads to me is if you didn't get your stuff in January for your committee, there's a good chance that there wouldn't be something available.
We don't ask the committees about what type of funding they need
Okay.
because inherently we know before the budget process even starts what they'll be working on
Mhm.
in the following year. So then that's what we take a look at to say like, oh, okay. And it's minimal.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't fund, for example, an initiative, like an update of the park and open space plan. I'll use that as an example. That came through the village manager's office,
Mhm.
through the capital budget.
Okay.
Anything that meets an expense like that should be a village initiative. Because they're volunteering for this particular committee, but ultimately, if those objectives don't serve the overall village initiative, we would not be funding it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. It was just the phrasing of the paragraph
Yeah.
that
let me
threw me
change
for
it
a
to be
loop
better.
of like, they are available January 1. I just didn't want like conservation, bike ped, and all these groups to come in gobble up all the funding because they know about it in January, February, and then a lesser known committee come in July and it's like, whoop, we're out of money. Sorry.
Mhm.
So that would be my only concern.
So one of the
But if it's not
conversations.
broke, I don't know that we need to fix it.
No, but I think it's helpful for you to understand that when an expense does come in, because Chris staffs most of the volunteer committees who would request funds from this. He's the first person I go to and okay, well, what do we have?
Mhm.
Let's go through the events that we know of this year, that you anticipate them to follow through on. If not, vice versa. And so we inherently always have that conversation.
Mhm.
If there are additional funds requested. Oh, and he has raised his hand. Chris, do you want to come off mute?
Is he?
Surely, thank you again. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think the intent of just making that language about, and yeah, you're right, Trustee Kudo, was not meant to say you've got to get all your requests in at the beginning of the year or you lose out. It was more so just kind of letting committees that do know and use this volunteer committee fund line item, just letting them know that they're not the only ones that use it. Because for a while there, the sentiment was, oh, our $2,000. It's no, that's for the entire, for all volunteer committees. So memorializing it in that way, while it was confusing, I think it was really more so just to let folks know that this pot of money is for all the volunteer committees to use.
Thank you. That's very helpful. You mentioned that committees aren't told about this? Is that on?
It's not that they're not told. I don't know, Chris, how does that dialogue work with your committees?
Well, again, I mean, with Parks and Public Spaces and with conservation, I mean, they have the luxury of, just historical, they know that it exists because they've requested it before. So perhaps that's something that we can fold into our boards, committees, commissions training where it's like, look, so everybody has a level playing field. If you have a project that you're working on and you need, $100 for yard signs or something, this is the process by which you would do it.
I think that'd be great. I mean, I don't think that I'm not proposing that they all have equal access to equal dollar amounts, but just that they know that they exist and that there might
Oh,
be
sure.
an opportunity, I think would be helpful.
That's also something that I can cover in the committee chair, roundtable that we do once a year. I can add that as a slide. This, at the time I created that PowerPoint, this was not done yet. So I didn't have that in there. But my intent, we can create a slide and I can go through these 3 policies. I think that'd be helpful. And it may not mean anything to them while they're there, but just a reference point so that they know
Okay.
that there's a process that goes with it.
I think as this sort of program starts to develop and and all the different committees know, there probably will be a lot more influx of requests. How do you foresee like handling this more in the future? Like right now, it's probably in this like infant stages and first come first serve, but there's going to be sort of bigger requests by committees, I would assume, and there's going to be, I think the village might all start to have to prioritize. How do you envision like maybe like let's say Bike and Ped's got something super big, but yet conservation's like, oh, we need $500 for this and this, but Bike and Ped isn't quite there yet, but we know that they might need some of that $500 for this. Do you envision that being sort of an issue as we get down and kind of in the future with these kind of groups sort of battling for this money? And is there anything we can do that's not just a first come first serve basis? Like, can we, get these applications for funds? Like, I know we're just speaking against like being January 1st, but is there sort of a timeline that we can put to groups so they can be reviewed and we can actually sort of make
like a grant making period?
like better sort of judgments? Because we don't want to, like, I don't want to say we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket, but we want to make sure that, if we've got a really big project, but we don't have the application just yet for those funds that are needed, but yet we have applications from people that maybe are lower hanging fruit that are trying to seek those funds, but they take all of that pot then from somebody that may need it even more. I'm just trying to think through all the different cases, because this is newer now, but once all the groups start to understand it, I'm thinking this is going to be a more.
Well, my intention is not
Dynamic
to
stuff.
fund more in this line item,
Right.
because if we are going to be doing something significant, it needs to be coming from this board.
The 2,000 is the
2,000 is the cap.
Yeah.
So,
Correct.
let's say conservation comes in, we want $2,000. Their
I would say
first-
no.
You would say no.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So
And she seemed pretty comfortable saying that, so.
Yeah,
That-
and
that's
it's
fantastic.
not that I
guess that's what
wouldn't
I'm-
like whatever they're looking to do, but we know I am boringly pragmatic, right? So not only will I be meeting with committee chairs and the staff liaison on a quarterly basis, but typically if something like that happens, it's going to be an anomaly, right? And it may also be the case where the committee may not have thought through those steps. So it would be better for them to, like, let's take a look at what this is and perhaps behoove them to plan for it in the next cycle.
Yeah.
You know,
I guess I would hate for
Yeah.
groups to sort of feel like there's favoritism or somebody's, if there's money there and somebody's not getting the money and somebody else is getting more money, I'd hate for there to be this kind of animosity between groups
mhm,
and folks, because we know how worked up some people can get. And I
Sure.
think when money's involved and, they're trying to develop things and all of a sudden the money's not there and they're frustrated about that. I just,
mhm.
I wonder if there's any sort of mechanisms. $2,000 is not a lot, but
No, it's not. But if something comes up and we haven't known about it, it came up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so my reflectiveness is how was that planned for?
Mhm.
And then we do our best
Yeah.
at that time, but I would have to say it will be pretty case specific.
Okay.
Um,
I guess I just don't want that all on your back because I think that could be, I mean, it's probably for the best in the long run that it's just you,
Mhm.
that it doesn't come to, because then it gets more political when it comes to the whole group.
I mean, ultimately, someone has to decide.
Yeah, and I think you're the best to decide that, but I'd hate for this somehow to come back on you and be like, well, Rebecca, isn't giving us any money and this person's getting more money. And so
Mhm.
I think you can manage that well. I just wonder if there's any sort of mechanisms there to not create that sort of tension within groups.
yeah, I mean, the goal here for me will never be to create tension,
No, I know.
but working with an understanding of I mean, it's really no different than any other thing that we work on. There's not unlimited
Yeah.
resources. And I would also be one of the first people if I did think it was if it merited something like that. I would also be comfortable with saying we're going to go over budget on that line item. But it really is case by case.
Okay.
Um,
I'm just trying to
Because
create a
it-
dialogue just to figure it out.
yeah,
Just to like.
no, I think that's really great because I want you to know how I'm going to approach it.
Yeah.
So much of, our budget year concludes. I mean, really, if you're looking to do something big, you need to be 2 years out.
Yeah.
It's an initiative.
Right. I mean,
So
like,
you-
and I know that sounds like such a drag to people sometimes. But the reality that I work in is that we do a budget, it comes together once a year. And then we make those decisions based upon the best information we have within the scope of that year.
Yeah.
And that's why we look at initiative. Nothing should be a surprise from that perspective.
Gotcha.
And if it is, well, sometimes it's a good surprise,
Mhm.
right? And we're gonna figure out a way to kind of move forward but sometimes it just needs to get into the queue.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So it's not really a denial, it's just
Mhm.
finding the right queue.
So, all right. Anything, I mean, I think I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
You're pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't see trustee McGovern on, unfortunately. So can we entertain a motion with are you comfortable with the changes of the administration? That word change?
Oh, yeah, I actually struck administrative expenses for volunteer committees and put volunteer committee activities.
Then.
I think it reads a lot better.
then
Thank you.
I'm fine with that.
Now, what was the second change?
Um,
Can you refresh
January,
my memory
the
on that?
paragraph in January.
Oh,
where-
yeah.
yeah, just sort of cleaning it up a little bit, just so it's clear that it's not truly a first come, first served. I mean,
Maybe just strike the
They
first
don't need
full
to
half
come in
of that.
January with their ask.
yeah, or your requests will be met, I don't know, like a rolling basis or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Okay,
But it also would probably be, like, the initiative process does get people to look ahead.
yeah.
So
Well, that's the goal of it.
Yeah, I mean, that would be
Right?
ultimately so super
And it's
helpful.
for education and programming, and all of those types of events are kind of in the same ballpark expense wise.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do a big new thing that quickly,
Correct.
at least to
Yeah.
go well.
So I'll look at that wording, but I'm gonna eliminate like the first line and a half. So it's gonna be deleted through first served basis. And then I like the rolling basis. I don't know who came up with that. But I'll,
Was it you?
something to that effect.
One of us, somebody did.
You're all smart. That's right. You all can have.
That's who we play on TV.
Okay. And then that'll be good. So then the only other action that is exactly the type of feedback I'm looking for.
Okay.
Thank you. And then I would just be looking for a motion to
Okay.
recommend the policy with those changes to the board.
And it's on the agenda tonight for new business, right?
No, that's actually policy
Oh, that's the other
47.
one. All right. Never mind.
Arthur, you
I
wanna make
can't
the
get
motion?
enough of these.
Or you want me to do it? Okay, I move to recommend the village board approve policy 48 volunteer community expenditures with the changes mentioned by village manager Ewald.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All in favor?
I,
Aye. No opposed, no abstentions. Motion passes 2-0.
And then just adjournment.
Yep, so that's the only agenda item for this evening. The chair would happily entertain a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Stand adjourned at 6:23.
Rebecca and Toya, I've got a question. All right, I'd like to call the meeting of the village board to order at 6:30 PM. We have all trustees present with trustee McGovern joining us virtually from Barcelona.
Madrid, actually.
What's that?
Barcelona next week.
Oh, sorry,
That's right.
Madrid. All right, thank you. Has this meeting been publicly noticed?
The meeting has been properly noticed and posted according to law.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for your time, talent, and patience in advance. Item 4, special order of business. We have 2 this evening. Consider resolution 2024-10 municipal ordinance violations deposit schedule. This item comes to us.
I think we're on committee of the whole.
Maybe a whole.
Oh, my
That's
word.
okay.
I would like to convene the village board for the committee of the whole. And we still have all trustees present. And we have one item on our agenda this evening, which is, nope, we have 2 items. Review long-range plan schedule and project descriptions, and to review current and proposed 2025 initiatives. So this is an annual review that we do, and we will hand it over to our new finance support or office and village manager for that presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not much of a presentation.
Okay.
We have the schedule, and then we have the project summaries, which were included within your packet. So
Mhm.
this is the opportunity for the board to ask questions about the schedule, what we know to date. Again, this is a projection that we do each year. So it's a snapshot in time for the information that we know as of right now. What I'd like to do perhaps is just start off talking through the timeline a little bit so that I'm sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what's on the schedule right now. And then when we conclude timeline, then I'd like to open it up for any questions with regards to the project summaries that were included within the packet. Most all of them you're going to be pretty familiar with, but it's opportunities to ask clarification questions of those things. So I'm going to start on the top of that Excel spreadsheet, the timeline. You will notice that in the local road program, from 2027 through 2030, that has been shaded gray. I noted within the scope of the memo to you that all those items that are shaded in gray will either be updated and presented to you on the June 17th meeting by City Water, or will be general projections based upon what we know of right now. Not knowing what our program will be for lead service lateral replacement within the scope of those years. We don't know which areas we would be into or reconstructing roads in which area of the village. So that will likely fall in line when the lead service line program receives some more definition. We are not coming back to alleys until 2031 to take advantage of that anticipated time frame of BIL funding that's available. You know, we know there's going to be funding available for the next 5 years. We also have projects such as Lake Drive, North Oakland, and then potentially others based upon the LSL program as well. For the sidewalk program, we have a minimal amount in 2025 and 2026 to only address those issues that we have within the field. We just simply don't have capacity to be doing that during the same year as Lake Drive reconstruction and North Oakland Avenue reconstruction. So then we come back to what would be considered more of a full program in 2027 moving forward. Oakland Avenue North, you'll see again offset by TID 5 funding, still on schedule for 2026. We have then the next line of Oakland Avenue South with a placeholder in 2030. We also, next on line 6, have the streetlight improvements, which are all of the streetlights in the village with the exception of those on Lake Drive. If you'll recall, the lights on Lake Drive needed to be designed in conjunction with the project. So those will deploy as Lake Drive is reconstructed. But this line references all of the other areas of the village. In each given year, you're going to be designing for the next year, and then constructing a phase in the same year. So that's reflective of the cost estimates that we have for that work. And I just put a caveat in that I don't think we're really going to know, well, these will be estimates from the contractor, but we haven't done this type. I mean, very rarely does a community say we're going to replace our entire streetlight system. And so we don't, I feel safe to say that those are just estimates. We'll wait for that first construction phase to come in, see what those costs are and learn more. We also have in here the future facilities for DPW. These projections have not changed since the ones that I provided last year within the LRP. We have acquisition and site review 2025, design occurring in 2026, construction occurring in 2027. We have a placeholder of 500,000 for the Village Hall facilities, primarily for pneumatics related to the HVAC and heating controls, which I look forward to learning more about from Mr. Hyan. That's been a placeholder that's been used in the past and continues to be used. So we'll look forward to leaning more into that. Nothing within the scope of the future facilities for Village Center. And then we have line 10, which are refuse trucks. At the time of putting this together, we had an estimate of around 315,000. Yep, okay. And then we had some new quotes come in for both gas and electric. And gas, I want to say, came in at 415,000 per truck. And Electric was 650. Yeah, okay. So the gas is what's quoted within the scope of this, but in there is a placeholder. And just the understanding that with those types of vehicles, they're 2 to 3 years out. So when you order, you have to be forecasted for what you're gonna see in 3 years, given the current market. Then we go down to water capital budget. This information is going to be reviewed and an update provided by City Water when we come back on June 17th. For that meeting, we're going to be solely focused on the water utility and going through a lot of those nuts and bolts. And then if you flip to the second page, the entire second page is CC. So you will see that phase 1 has dropped off because it has been completed. We see phase 2 in 2020, or pardon me, and phase 2 has dropped off as well because we're currently under construction, which leaves the last phase of phase 3, which occurs in 2025, and is essentially the sewer improvements that will take place in Lake Drive. And that concludes the timeline for what we know right now.
And just at this pause,
It's
it
our-
is incredible that CC
Yeah,
1
this is
and
really
2
amazing.
are
Look at
off.
this.
Mhm.
Wow. How
And-
impressive is that?
A
Okay.
huge change.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you so much. A lot of change in the past 5-7 years. Okay, so you wanted to do the
So
Okay.
I'll entertain questions on
Okay.
timeline.
great questions for village
Okay.
manager, trustee Ursink?
On timeline, I was just wanting to, are we talking about fully electric refuse trucks? No gas, fully electric?
So
They make those models, 2 fully electric?
here's one of the dynamics about refuse trucks. We have an older facility.
Mhm.
For us to actually put in, and this is my understanding, so DPW can correct me anytime. In order to put stations inside and actually park vehicles to charge on the inside, we would now need to park half of that fleet from inside of the building outside.
Because of the space, I would assume the space it requires to put the station.
Correct. I don't know if you want to. Oh, can you?
We have
confirm
four,
this?
right?
I'm sorry.
We have 4.
Sure.
Yeah, and if you just want to, or, yeah. Sorry.
So what would end up happening is because of what we would need to charge them, the stations would be rather big to fast charge them, to make sure that they're ready to go by the following day, because they're 9 hours at that point. So then those charging stations would be rather big and we impact that garage. So it would end up taking the spot of probably 3 trucks.
It's not exactly a wattage or the voltage.
No, it's nothing like that. No, we'd be able to do that part fine. It's more or less the space that we would need.
With this type of purchase, could we get them to give us the charger?
Probably not.
A little
No.
Negotiation, a little like, hey. we
I don't
got
know,
these new
those
trucks.
fast chargers
Yeah,
are very
those-
expensive.
So-
Yeah. And as of right now, there's only one chassis that is all electric, and that is Mack, as of right now, that I
Mhm.
know of.
And so we would need a new facility, whether it was on the current site or another site, like we just don't.
It's close though, right? I mean, these are close timelines. You need the
Right.
trucks in 2027 and we're, starting to build in 2027.
I
So
know.
I think it's very close and, it'd be something this is
Well,
what
it's
we're trying to get.
achievable. Yeah, no, exactly.
Right.
But it's definitely hard to base. You kind of have to make one decision
Correct.
or the other,
Yeah.
but these are, to your point, a
I know
couple
we're
years out.
talking about it right now. This
Yeah.
isn't like the topic right now, but it's a conversation. I think this is a really important conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, that's why I
strategic
put in the
initiatives.
timeline.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because I want to talk about it, but I also recognize that there's a chicken and egg and just a practicality of the fact that we're going into still, we're gonna be in these heavy years of construction work going on. And then adapting a facility that I don't even know we're gonna use in that way. And
So yeah,
It's
so it's not that it's achievable. We just don't have a lot of the information
details.
tonight.
Mhm.
And that's why electrification is going to be in strategic initiatives.
Okay, okay.
Committee.
So if we need to make that decision for them to get the trucks in 2027, is that the idea? To get the trucks in 2027 or order the trucks in 2027?
number one, this is the first time this has hit your radar on the schedule.
Okay,
And the purpose of me doing that is because I like to talk frequently about, when we look at this schedule, for me, it's a living, breathing document. So if it's on my mind, I want to be sharing what's on my mind with all of you.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to make a business decision, in order for that to be successful, right? It's not just the buying of a charger or something else. It's actually getting this culture that we have here to revolve around electrification,
right.
right?
So your
what-
question is, when do we have
Yeah,
to
I'm
make
saying,
the
like, do you
decision to
need
be
these vehicles
ready?
in 2027 or 2029?
2025.
Yeah,
I mean,
But that, I mean, so,
But I mean,
go ahead, I'm
Sure.
sorry.
because we're getting close to,
The way I read it in the packet.
Yeah.
Was that delivery was not, our payment was not made at the time of order. Payment's made at
correct,
time of
Mhm.
delivery of the chassis, right?
correct.
So
Thank you for reading.
you're welcome.
Oh,
Um, so I have two questions. One, is this, I know that we're scheduled and I know that these are high use vehicles. Is this a want to have in 27 or a need to have in 27, which is my first question. Because if it's a want to have, then there isn't the massive rush to make a decision on electric or get traditional gasoline or fuel because we don't know about DPW yet, so we could hold off on that decision. It's not like one is pushing the other necessarily.
Mhm.
But if it's an absolute must have, then that's a different conversation. But again, in the packet.
Yeah.
I have a question on,
So I had to take it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
could I ask a question? Just, how long do the trucks last? So like if we buy a new truck now or for delivery in 2028, how long would we still be using it if it's diesel or electric?
I don't know the answer to electric. I'll give that to Dan, but
Uh,
diesel, you estimate 10 years.
Yeah, these are ones we slated. Electric, probably as long as the battery.
And when did we buy our,
2017.
2017.
When we took delivery of them. But we ordered them in late 2016, early 2017.
so I can,
Oh, and every single one of those trucks that we have, I've had to replace the rear axles
okay.
at $20,000 crack.
And why do you think that is?
Because they were made by Mack and they were sold as heavy duty, and they are not.
So just,
So
the-
that's actually like a manufacturer.
They told us they told us they were user error, and it is not. If Waste Management has the same issue with them.
But now we have new rear axles.
I have one that has a new rear axle, one that's being slated to be replaced as we speak right now.
so now I have a follow-up question.
What's,
And just so you know, trustee Stokebrand's
Go
in the
ahead.
queue. So
Oh.
trustee Kudo, finish, please.
So my follow-up, so she said it's a 10-year life.
Yeah.
So we got them in 2017,
Mm-hmm.
but then we needed to replace them in 2025.
Well, because they're old. So the
So it's an
auto,
8-year life.
yeah, the auto loaders take a lot of beating
Mm-hmm.
just because it's a lot of moving parts.
Mhm.
The rear packers, we could probably get 12, 15 years. Like
You have
those,
two of each.
yes, we have two of each because we have to do alleys. So we also have a backup truck in case I lose a truck. We can still maintain our service level for garbage.
Okay.
But then you have an extra percent on.
Correct. So as of right now, one of the auto loaders is down. So now I have two people doing what one
Manual
person
loading.
should be doing because they're getting out and grabbing every cart instead of going out and grabbing it. And that's been the past couple of years. That seems to be the downhill slope with those auto loaders. Ones we would probably replace first would be those.
And would we replace them with auto loaders or we replace them
Yes.
with?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? The first ones you replace would be the self-pack, the extra. person?
The ones that reach out and grab them,
Oh.
dump them.
The
Those
auto
would be the ones we would replace.
This might be out of scope, but with what frequency do those auto loaders go down?
I'd probably say in the course of a year, grand total with regular maintenance, maybe 2 to 3.
That's a greater rate than the rear.
Than everything else I have, yes.
Trustee Stokbrand?
So I noticed in the packet, we are quoted the price for the diesel, and that's $350,000. So if we stick with the diesel for one more rotation vehicle, we would save $65,000 on each vehicle. And as much as I want to go green, I have to wonder about the way the industry is changing so quickly. And you would hope that prices would come down. If we could go with the diesel one more cycle, one more 10-year cycle, I mean, this is real money. $65,000. That's $250,000.
Yeah.
Noted.
So,
Mhm.
It's,
no, I mean, I'm just
Uh,
doing.
so the
I'm just
diesel
taking
one is,
410 for the gas. and subtracting the
diesel's
three-
410, that
Oh.
410 is diesel, and then
Oh.
all electric's like 650. So you're saving yourself like $200,000.
on
from
each.
20
I'm sorry,
to
what
40.
did you just?
Yeah,
So this is for
thanks.
planning purposes, 350,000 is utilized.
The
as an-
350 was an old number from last year.
Oh,
So I was trying to placeholder a number as I was waiting to get a quote back, and then
We
it drastic.
So the
Yeah,
so the
we
real
got the
difference
quote
is
Friday.
Yeah,
So you
What's the
guys, the
diesel
package had
cost?
already been released.
410.
410, oh,
Yeah.
same as the gas.
There is no gas. It's just my
Oh.
put in there.
so the
Okay,
so the
410,
difference
okay.
between the two vehicles that are electric and the two vehicles that are not electric
Yes,
is $240,000 a piece for a grand total of $480,000 for both pieces.
correct, sir.
Okay.
And noted about the concern around that.
I mean, and these are, you said they're Max?
They're
Mac is the only one.
Mac chassis as of right now, yes.
And those are the same, that's the same Mac that delivered the trucks that have the bad rear axles.
Correct,
And that would be the only company we could go with at this point.
correct. And on
Okay.
top of that, when we bought the Max, that was the only thing that had the low entry, which
Sure.
we need in order to prevent the guys from jumping out of a high truck. So there's
Fair.
only 2 manufacturers that make a low entry. It's Mac and Crane Carrier.
And then are the electrics low entry as well?
They can be, yes.
What was the other one?
Crane Carrier.
Crane?
Crane
Yeah, Crane Carrier.
They
Yeah.
don't make electric.
As far as I know, no,
Okay.
Not yet.
not yet. But there are like electric bodies.
Yeah.
So like,
I mean, at this point, I'm inclined to agree with Trustee Stokebrand that while I would love to make the jump, that's a substantial difference, not including infrastructure costs, not including the fact that there's only one manufacturer, and I imagine they have not been around very long.
2 maybe.
Right. So, you know,
I mean, obviously it's very compelling that all of the signs are pointing towards re-upping on gas, but I mean, I think it's still worth I'd love to
Take a look,
like
yeah.
It'll
dig
go to-
deeper into this conversation and
it's
just really
gonna go to
push the kind
committee.
of boundary on where we can
Yeah.
go with this.
chat out in committee.
Yeah, it is going to be in committee.
Yeah, we don't need to make a decision on it
Exactly.
tonight. The importance of me bringing it to you and putting it on this schedule is to say, hey, guys, this is sizable, right? The last time, my understanding is when these were purchased the last time, it was done through a borrowing. So it's on your radar, like I want it on the radar. And I really appreciate hearing where everybody's coming from because some of the same points that you guys have mentioned tonight are the same ones that we've talked about and wrestled with here. And I just, from the electrification perspective, just the whole dynamic of trucks and automotives within the next 3 years is just going to be,
I think this is just like a
Changing.
little too early for us,
yeah.
you know?
Well, and also, again, like the long-range financial plan, this meeting every year is not a decision-making meeting.
Right.
It's a
Mhm.
landscape meeting because everything on here comes through committee and through the traditional process and budgeting. So it's really just getting that timeline.
You know,
But definitely to your point, registering questions and concerns and
Mhm.
opinions, totally, we get those in writing and then they come, but every single thing on this list is going to come off and go through the
Mhm.
traditional process. So
Fantastic. Yeah. It also,
And I'd just like to add one thing for scheduling, for looking at this in committee is that there is an EPA grant that would cover half the costs of both charging infrastructure or the electric trucks themselves is due July 24th. So we haven't formally looked at that, but I think it's something committee should look at.
Thank you.
I was just gonna say, I think this would be a great conversation to have Matt around at, and that's why. Thanks, Matt.
Alternative
Did-
funding
Did you
source.
say the deadline is July 24th?
Yes.
Are you guys busy?
Well-
tonight still?
We really are out of scope now. So,
But it's so much fun.
But that timeline, that
But
is the concern
because-
with the grant.
Right.
and trustee McGovern has
Because,
already shared
like-
this information with village manager. So in terms of like agendaing it and sort of contemplating it, it's on the radar.
Okay.
Don't worry. I don't know how we're gonna get there, but we're gonna get there.
Well, where there's a will, there's a way.
Exactly.
Heard that before.
Yeah.
Jim, did you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, are there no police vehicles on here because they don't meet the price, the cost threshold, or because
We
we're not?
don't borrow for them.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good
Um,
question.
That's why I had put refuse on here, and that's again, something that we're gonna go back and talk with LNA about. The village has traditionally not borrowed for that type of, infrastructure or capital item. So the trucks were the last thing that I could see, but as we dive into it a little bit more. Because if not, I mean, you're taking that entire amount from your capital budget. So in this last year, we didn't even have a capital budget that was 700,000. It was less than that. So from a plan, that's why, like, from a planning perspective, right? We need to kind of benchmark, maybe we do take up the whole capital budget with the purchase of trucks between 2 years. I'm not sure, but right now I have it plugged in here because my reference point was the last time that was a borrowing.
Mhm.
But then you'd be doing no other capital activities through the general. fund.
Is there a reason that we don't the purchase? Could we do like 50 per year? You know what I'm saying? Is there a reason that we do all at once instead of like every 5 years we do half our fleet for because they are so expensive?
That's gonna be a good question for Leanne.
Yeah, so that would certainly be my goal, would be to stagger them. The issue, I think the place that we find ourselves right now is that our last purchase of trucks, they were all purchased at one time. And the reason for that is at the time, we were doing a pretty comprehensive review of our collection system that went on for a number of years. And so we got to the point where every one of our trucks was overdue for replacement. So we were kind of forced into a position where we had to replace them all at the same time. So again, as Dan mentioned, that the arm loaders have definitely have a shorter lifespan than the rear loaders. We were told at the time that we ordered those that we should assume an 8-year life on those trucks. Again, rear loaders can go for quite a bit longer than that. So it would be our recommendation preference that if we stagger those trucks and focus first on the automated trucks. And then at a point in time after that, then go after the rear loaders.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
I'm just wondering, the alley reconstruction program, Appendix A, says that we would not propose before 22X. I'm guessing that's just typo because I see we have it in here. So do we really want to wait 7 years before we redo any? That's a lot. I have a concern. The other thing is, I see we're into sidewalks. First or second? Sidewalk. That number was about the same as last year, but alley construction, then it's in half because we're gonna not do it for. When was the last time we did an alley? So we'd go about 10 years with. I've got a concern. I'm wondering about the doubling in the cost of Oakland North. Last year in the long range financial plan, 3.3 million. I know it evens out. We have the input from KID, but why did it go from 3.3 to 6?
I believe that 6.2 is an all-in number that includes utilities. Is that correct? So that's the entirety of the project rather than I think the number that you're referring to from last year was perhaps a pavement or a roads number with the utilities separated.
It's not indicated that, but that's fine. Okay, great. Good to know.
Yeah, so on that, I just want to, can I pause for 1
Yeah.
second? And that we'll have to separate that out within the scope. So that's the process improvement. You'll see this will now be reformatted and we'll separate it out between roads, water and sewer.
Okay.
Thank you.
And biggest, best surprise of the night, $15 million for resident. Instead of 23, what am I missing? Is this only,
You'll have that presentation this evening.
oh, because the numbers in that presentation also were about 50, but I must be missing something. Okay, good to know. So I should delay my euphoria. That it looks like a big $8 million savings. Okay.
Can I circle back to alleys
Yeah.
for a second? So, when we were talking about alleys, number one, capacity is the first thing, particularly in the next couple of years because of how intense, the schedule is. And then as we look at moving forward, one of the questions that I had for Leanne and that I was, talking with her about is, well, what does that really look like? And without knowing the landscape of the lead service line program, I can't rightfully commit to any other project because I don't know what that looks like. So I want to let you know that I hear you. But if it drops, if you don't see it come back on the schedule in a year sooner than 2031, right? That it's really a capacity, like how much can we actually do in a year? I mean,
So in other words, what you're presenting in the timeline is at full capacity.
mhm.
So if we are to change this, then it gets us out of it exceeds capacity.
Just as a matter of curiosity, so there's obviously a number of things on here, right?
Mhm.
And they affect capacity in different ways. I know that, there are some instances, street reconstruction, where laterals can be included in that, and you can sort of kill two birds with one stone.
Mm.
I'm looking at this individually, but is there anything that we're missing or any opportunities we have? Obviously, laterals from the front of the house and alleys are not in the front of the house, and so those aren't, those don't work well together. But are there any programs or anything that we can do together at once? And we could sort of set aside capacity just for a moment, just to discuss. But is there anything we could be doing for alleys or sidewalks or whatever that is a kill two birds with one stone project that isn't on this, that would be forth next year in a future plan or the year after that? Am I being
No,
clear at all?
I hear exactly where you're coming from, and I think I'll start, and Leanne, if you have anything to add, I think the challenge is that at this point in time, right now, the lead service line and water main, which I always say LSL, but the bulk of
Right.
that is really water main. Those are the types of decisions we'll need to make annually based upon funding.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's secured, how we deploy that. And then, of course, we're going to want to, that's exactly why we implemented a lead service line program before CC started, because we said we were going to be digging up all of this. We're not going to want to go back and cut into a road
Right.
because it's no one's best interest. And fiscally, it doesn't make any sense.
But so stuff like lead service or water mains or, there's no crossover between that. And this is going to sound crazy, but there's no crossover between that and like street lighting, right? It's like you have the drill there once, you drill one.
I don't think
Well,
so.
Is there anything that we can do to save by doing
think streetlights are, if I may.
You probably shouldn't cross electrical with water, but you know, what do I know?
No, but that complete, that comprehensive approach to street reconstruction that we do, where it's like everything gets replaced there. It just doesn't include alleys. So
And that's
that's
my-
the one thing that would be an outlier.
But not having
And
been,
I don't mean to, you guys are the professionals, but
I guess, I mean, not having been on the board in 21 when alleys last came up, are there any
Sure.
other things that if you're going to do an alley or you're going to do a street, it's easier just to do an alley at the same time, you know, stuff like that.
I think that attempt to stack projects is the approach that we have been taking for the last several years. I definitely don't want to do a street and an alley at the same time.
for access to the residents.
I don't have an alley, so what do I know?
Yeah, right.
Sure.
But yes, as Rebecca noted, our approach when we started designing and planning for the CC projects was different than it had been in the past, in that we determined that when we had that road excavated, we were going to do everything within that road as part of that project. That was not the direction that our staff had been given, years prior to that
Mhm.
from a previous administration. So definitely looking at everything that way.
Okay. And that's, again, that's, I feel like I'm supposed to ask that question, so I did.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up because there was, alleys were a really big discussion, and there's a difference between repaving, like we have the repaving project
Rebuilding,
that's
yeah.
in odd years or even, and then there's the reconstruction that's the other years. And so it does get confusing. So I just wanted to note, I believe there's a question in the chat. Of course, I'm going to continue taking trustee, but I'm just making a note that I received word. So trustee Ursink and then trustee Stokebrand.
Leanne, could you just give us an idea of the alleys that are like sort of, sorry, you could come sit up here. Like, why don't you just sit next to me? There's an open seat here. We got so many questions for you. I guess my question is, how many alleys do you feel are in that very critical sort of need of repair, repavement? I know we've been through a couple recently, and if you could just update us to those mission critical alleys.
Off the top of my head, I would say that list is relatively small for the next couple of years. You may or may not recall that a determination was made by the village board to double, so 22 would not have been an alley program year. Village board directed staff to design and build a double alley program in that year, even though we had just done an alley program the year prior, in recognition of the fact that it would be several years before we return to alleys because of the large docket of infrastructure projects on the schedule from 23 into the late 20s.
And I will add that it depends on who you're asking as far as the condition of the alley. So
Yeah.
people who live on the alley would probably not agree with the conditions report that we have.
I live on an alley. It's rough around the edges. It wasn't part of any of the reconstructions or anything like that, but it's fine.
So we are
you-
not required to, but we do use the same rating system on alleys that we are required to use on roadways.
Mhm.
That is a WISTAT requirement for
generous.
state transportation aids.
Mhm.
We voluntarily implemented that on our own alleys in order to, create an objective system for identifying them for reconstruction. I'll be honest with you, I haven't looked at it in a year or two. But my recollection is that, we rate on a 1 to 10 scale. 1 and 2 tend to be, it's over, don't put any more money in it, replace it. We definitely wiped all of those off the schedule. I think now the majority of our alleys kind of sit in that top of the bell curve, which would be your 3, your 4, 5, 6. Which is not to say there aren't specific areas of some alleys that don't need attention. That I would not deny. But in terms of we are required, we rate the entirety of the alley. So the average condition of the segment of the alley.
And it's like a block for one block.
So what we rate streets by block, but then the alleys, we rate the block, that block alley.
And I'm sorry, is that an annual rating? I'm sorry if I.
It's
misheard.
biannual.
Okay.
And just a quick follow-up, will you spot sort of, if there's some areas that are just super critical, will you go in there and
Yep.
work on just those specific areas?
And actually, I believe I mentioned in the narrative that we would be looking at the potential of additional operating funds to address through contracted maintenance, some of those areas, those specific areas that are showing extreme wear.
Gotcha. Okay.
Trustees Dorkbrand, this is just can you speak closer to your mic?
Sorry.
No, the chat comment was people just wanting to hear you. Okay.
So I guess to really be able to move forward with this plan, to not do anything with alleys for 10 years, I would need to know which alleys are the worst and who would we be saying, sorry, it looks like maybe we'll do a patch in 7 or 8 years, but we're not looking at, I think if we haven't looked at that, it's probably data I need to know before I can sign off on it. I was going to ask too then, so when we go back onto line 10, refuse trucks, how many trucks do we want to split this out now? Do we want to put 2 in 2027, 28, and then do we want to take the other 2 out? You see what I'm saying? How many would that 1.4 million be? I guess that's something, as we're going forward with this plan tonight, this is not final, just going forward, if we're talking about, possibly splitting up the inventory and doing them 50-50, how would that look? And I guess it depends on if we go like,
That's really up to you, how that looks.
okay,
This was listed for, as Rebecca said, this is the landscape. This is what needs to be scheduled for replacement. We do have some options. I would, certainly suggest that we focus on those automated trucks at the cost of $410,000 or so each. The rear loaders replacements could be scheduled, I think it's reasonable to assume we can get at least 5 years more of life out of the rear packers, perhaps more, depending upon how frequently and in what ways we use them. So I mean, I would like to see at least one of the automated trucks scheduled for replacement.
in the 2025 budget, you'd place the order.
Right, so that
And
we
you'd
have it
maybe
in
have it by
27,
28. Oh, 27.
2 years.
Okay.
If
So
all
that would
goes
be-
well, 3 years. If it doesn't,
Yeah.
So the borrowing would occur, in the 2025 budget to order, that would be village board action, not as part of the budget. It would, because it wouldn't be 2025.
Correct.
It's a separate,
So what I would,
like a contract or something.
because we'd be submitting an order for something that wouldn't be procured within this year, and given the fact that boards change.
Yeah.
I would handle that no differently than NSFD.
Mm-hmm.
So we pass a resolution.
That's what it is. Yeah. I should think.
So that the board, and whatever board is in the seat, right, at the time that
Mhm.
comes in, because you can't just tell us to purchase something for 400,000 and then not pay it
Mhm.
later. You could, but it would not
so
be
pers-
something I'd recommend.
So procedurally, that would come, so to be clear, we don't adopt this or finalize this as a working document. But what is finalized is as those items come off and get channeled through our village board for action, this will come to us as a resolution in the fall, right? Or will
I
it be
don't
in
know-
2025?
I don't know that timing yet, but
Okay.
when you see it, I will let you know that the time has come.
So any follow-up regarding that should be directed.
Okay, I noticed this year we have no village center HVAC. Is that because we did some Band-Aids last year? That was on the long range plan last year.
So it was, and if you'll recall, we actually funded it within the capital budget. I've been spending a lot of time acquainting myself with the commercial HVAC tax rebate program. It's not as clear. The IRA bill made some modifications, and so we're trying to vet through the process to see if there's any funding that could come through from the bill to help with that. we will not be deploying it this year just because they're about a full year out on order. So from a capital budgeting perspective, I hope to be back to you with the game plan of how we're going to move forward with it once we can get through the minutia of the programs and see who's able to do that for us. But it will likely not be installed until next year, just because of the supply chain.
You mean the Band-Aid that we approved last year?
I don't recall the,
I thought we did
Band-Aid.
something, anyway, it's
We
just,
had-
it was a $350,000,
250.
250.
Yep, and that we did fund within the 2025 budget.
Actually, it was 350,000 for 28, 29 last year, but
Correct.
the Village Center HVAC.
Dan, do you have has anything I've said been inaccurate? I don't want to go into all the.
Okay, so
programs, 'cause
it's
that's-
not a deal anymore. It's taken care of for now.
Correct,
not-
that's why I took it.
We're
off.
not bonding for it.
Correct.
Okay. I guess the thing that seems to be coming forward a lot is there's so much in limbo with the federal money that it's really difficult for me to understand how we're going to make sure, like Mr. McGovern, Trustee McGovern said, wow, but deadline by July 4th to get money. We're waiting to hear about what we can get with the lead laterals, how that funding piece will work. As someone who is on the Budget and Finance Committee, it's really hard for me to get an understanding of how we move forward with so much uncertainty. And one of those things that makes me even more curious about how we can make these pieces work and get as much federal funding as possible is the capacity issue. Because it's going to take a lot of time and effort to chase the federal dollars. And I understand that. And so we're, it looks to me like we're over capacity and we need to slow something down. And so I'm wondering about moving, I think we need to do something with Public Works to move forward. We haven't decided on the location. That's another discussion, but I'm wondering about moving. We've talked about doing, it seems to me a critical piece that will give us a lot of information, and we've talked about this before, is doing the soil testing, at least on the site that we've got, so we know what we'll be dealing with. Even if we end up selling it, we have to do that. And I'm wondering if we can start with that in 2025 and then move everything over 2 columns, 3 columns, I guess, to wait and see what we can get from federal funding for so many things. And so that we are not, I have concerns about staff capacity. We're told that Village Board cannot have any initiatives. We're too full. I think the rubber band is stretched too tight and it's too hard on staff. It's too hard on the residents. It's too hard on the elected officials for us to run this high at capacity with so many unknowns. You know, for the federal government to say, oh, you have 20 to 30 years to do lead laterals. Oh, sorry, now it's 10. You know, and then we have the thing with Lake Drive, you know, we had a plan for that and then they decided to move that at the state level. We have to roll with that. We don't have a choice, which then affects North Oakland Avenue. I mean, there's just a lot of things that we're under the gun from other government agencies that leave us in a situation where we have to ensure that we're making it work for the best for everybody here. And the capacity issues worry me. And so for that reason, I'd like to see us start with the soil testing on the current DPW site in 2025, and then slide the other issues over 3 columns.
Okay, thank you. I guess we can note that, and when the item, discussion of the future of the Public Works site comes back in front of this board, that would be a time to consider that option. Okay, we have another item to address in this meeting, and we have just a few more than 10 minutes, about 12 minutes left.
Sure. Well, initiatives, it's not that I don't want you to do more, but right now I'm at a point where I'm not sure which direction we're heading on some of the major ones that we're working on. So the only way we get there is by doing the work to figure out where we're going. So that's where we're at.
So what you want, so there's a memo in our packet with an explanation, just saying like level set of where we're at, and an indication that with the once clarity is, more information is received on the lead lateral replacement and the future of the public works site and the action regarding the use of TID1 funds for affordable housing and or other developments, that will determine, once we get information back from that next action, that would indicate capacity level. So for example, if for some reason, if the board says, no, we're not moving ahead with public works at this time, then that's less time that's needed this year on public works. If the lead service lateral for some reason gets delayed, or we get indication that there's nothing that needs to happen in that, that lightens up something else. Is that
Correct.
so? Not a lot. So that's not to mean that we won't take on any other initiatives, but that staff is recommending that we pause and have a reset. And then with the next round of information that comes back to us, we would be asked to reassess. Okay, so are there any specific questions that we can, again, no action is required at this time. It's an update. So we would note any comments at this time. Trustee Ursink.
Just looking through the list of village board initiatives here, I don't see any sort of projects for Capital Drive. Is that just an oversight, or is that?
I thought I had placed it on there.
Good catch.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I remember typing it in there. 'Cause
So
it was
would
the
that
last
not
one
be
on there.
I thought that was a public works initiative at this point.
It went to committee and it was recommended, right?
Correct. Yep. Yeah, that should be listed right below.
For
I wonder
2025.
if I just cut it off in the boxing,
I think so too.
but that is listed there, and I will add that. Thank
Mhm.
you. Oh,
Should we prioritize these? Should we put numbers in front of them? Would that be helpful?
no. And here's why. Because for some, I don't have, some are heavy in some areas of public works that aren't heavy in others, right? So, without getting some more definition around some of them, it's hard to gauge
Mhm.
at this point in time.
Yeah,
But I
we're not being
understand
asked for that.
there's going to be more information that will be forthcoming.
What's the best way to give you this feedback?
Oh, I'm going to ask you for it.
Okay.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
when I have more data in front of me to try to assess what I think I know, right, with new topics. I mean, some of these things are just new.
Right.
They're once in a lifetime, literally. From the projects that we're working on in the village. I mean, so I keep that in perspective. I've just gotten really, really good at being very okay with not knowing it all, because we don't control it all. I can come to you with the facts of, here's tactically what we know about and what we've done so far. But the majority of items on this list have only been done once in the village's lifetime.
Mhm.
And that is literally when we were created.
Yeah.
I mean, I kid you not, and then at that time, and I was just talking to finance about this today and in a different meeting. It is possible because they did it all at one time within a very limited number of years. But that just means that, 100 years later, we're back at it. And that's nobody's fault. It's we just, as a village, we increased our population over 10,000 within a really short period of time. And so we became a village on the fact that we wanted better infrastructure. That's why we have streetlights. It's just that right now we have the same streetlights that we put into the ground in the early 1900s.
Same DPW as well.
Correct. I know. So like, it's kind of, it's awing, but at the same time, walking away from those and not being agile to learn as much as we can as we go through these changes, whether it be BIL funding, whether it be lead lateral, whether it be electrification. I mean, a lot of my time is listening to webinars on the grants for electrification, on the different things, learning about what communities are doing. And we just, I share that with you because I and the rest of the staff are really trying to position ourselves always to be in the best position possible to pivot, because we will have to, and it will be called normal because all of the other communities are doing the same thing. So,
Actually, some of them refuse to think about these things.
right. Well, some of them,
And they refuse to
I
learn
could
about.
bury my head in the sand and, oh, it's going to be your next manager's deal.
Yep.
Right.
And they don't
Um,
look at funding. So
But I
anyway, we
don't,
need
I
to-
mean, I really want to try to tackle them in the most responsible way we know how, but we're going to have conversations going forward on all these topics where the reason someone hasn't done it before is because they're tough. And we got to check, every time. And that's why we check in on this plan, right? Nothing on this plan should be a surprise. Nothing in your initiatives should be a surprise if we're really doing our job. And I have to say, I think you guys are really doing your job. And I appreciate the fact that I know that I can come to you when we hit a different point to say, here's what we know now, right? And that's the evolution of that information, and the changes that are occurring are really just history making. I mean, lead service lateral, who knew that it would happen?
Do we have time for streetlight questions?
we
have a
should
whole
make,
presentation coming.
yeah, tonight. We have,
Yeah, that's actually under your
it?
regular, I mean, if you'd like, we have,
This is special order of business. Okay.
I do. If I could just make one more point.
yes.
I think staff does an incredible job with all the responsibilities they have, and I'm extremely grateful. But besides staff capacity, the other issue I really will have concerns about is debt capacity
Mhm.
and how much debt we can take on and still be responsible fiduciaries for the village. And so, that's why I look forward to more discussions about how we're going to pay for this and the closure of, I kind of eyeballed 2028 for possibly looking at public works starting then, because it looked to me like we might be closing TIDS and we'd have more taxable land. So it's a lot of pieces to put together. We are looking at astonishing infrastructure costs. There's no doubt about it. I just want to make sure that we're doing it in a very responsible way. Thank you.
I could not agree with you more.
Mhm.
And so that point, when we come back, once we have these projects in, we hear from water, then that's where LNA is going to be pulling together that information so we see what those projections are. And it'll be a lot of information to digest, and that's okay.
The final
Because,
thing, our North Shore debt is not in here, right? Because we pay for that out of cash flow. All the money that we owe for North Shore Fire and Rescue, the new building in Glendale, is not on this because it's not something we bond for, but yet we pay for. And so I just
Right, we
think
would
that's,
levy for
Correct.
that.
It comes
Another-
out in our debt schedule.
yeah.
But
And so
we're
that's
not
another
borrowing
debt.
for it in the future.
It's another debt that we're not even seeing on these pages, is our fire rescue and dispatch.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Good point.
All right. Motion to adjourn? Is that what you were?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 We stand adjourned at 7:26. Thank you. All right, thank you very much. I'd like to call the village board to order at 7:31 PM. All trustees are accounted for, are present, with trustee McGovern joining us virtually. Has this meeting been publicly noticed?
The meeting has been properly noticed and posted according to law.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for your, welcome everyone. Thank you for your time, talent, and patience in advance as we conduct business this evening. Moving on to item 4, special order of business, we have 2. 4A, consider resolution 2024-10 municipal ordinance violations deposit schedule. This comes to us from Judge Margot Kirschner.
Margot, if you would just want to come up, there's a microphone up there and you'll just need to talk right into it.
And I'll just say it's nice to have you in the courtroom tonight on that side and not this side.
Thank
Oh,
you.
you're going to need to
President
pull that.
Pull even closer?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've gotten really
so-
comfortable
All
getting
right.
very
More of an
close to
How about
the
that?
microphone.
Is that better?
Yes.
All right. Thank you to all the trustees for letting me talk today and to present this to you. I also want to thank the heads of the Department of Public Works and Building and Code who are here actually today, and Chief Worth for their input on this project, and also the Village Attorney Nathan Bear and Assistant Village Attorney Bill Deneen for their assistance as well. So by Wisconsin statute 800.037, the municipal judge sets the deposit schedule with the approval of the trustees. And that's why I'm here today, to ask for your approval. And what is the deposit schedule? I sent around a memo. I assume you've read that, but just the short version for anyone who hasn't read it in the gallery today. It's the amount that is set forth on the ticket when the police officers issue the ticket. So there's a number at the top, and these are for non-traffic violations. The traffic violation schedule for amounts of tickets is set at the state level. So these are for ordinance violations such as retail theft, marijuana possession, disorderly conduct, other violations of the code that have the ability to have a penalty set by the by the charging and then the adjudication of guilt in the municipal court. So these are the amounts that are kind of like the standard start frame of reference. If somebody doesn't dispute the ticket and they just want to pay the amount, this is the amount that's set on the ticket that they would pay. They can always come to court and we can talk about it. But by the code of the Village of Shorewood, offenses can range from anywhere from $10 to $2,000 for a first offense, and then $50 to $3,000 for a second offense. So all of these amounts in the deposit schedule have to and do fit within that framework. So they all comply with that outer limit, and generally they are in the lower amount of that limit. How this process worked is that I discussed with Village Attorney Bear about gathering input from various department heads. I was contemplating doing this already because we hadn't looked at it in over 10 years when the Department of Public Works had some questions about some of the deposits, and that was a great time to really start the project and look at it. So we've compiled suggestions from all the different departments, and then after that I went through, adjusted some just in my discretion based on what I thought they should be, but generally for the most part accepted what the suggestions were from the experts in those departments. And then I also compared our deposit schedule to Fox Point and Whitefish Bay, and just to kind of see general ranges. So what I presented to you that was in the packet is the proposed amounts. A red line was not really possible because of the formatting of the table, but also because this is how it is from 2013 with some adjustments in 2018. It's like in this, paper booklet that had to be kind of recreated electronically to create the new version. So just a couple things to point out that for the changes tonight, things that trustees may, consider of note. The main reduction is for possession of marijuana and drug paraphernalia. So those are reduced in this proposed deposit schedule from $250 for a first offense to $100 for a first offense. And know that that amount, the forfeiture, that's a base amount. And on top of that are mandatory state assessments for like supporting the jail, the crime lab, various other state required fees and charges, in addition to $38, which is currently allowed for court costs. So for instance, like a $150 ticket turns out to be $250. So what I'm really asking the board to approve is that base amount, because all those other amounts get automatically added on. And I would like approval of the base amount, because in case those state charges change, we don't have to come back if it's mandatory by state law, not to come back and ask for, a reapproval of something that we really don't have any control over. So really you're looking at the forfeiture amounts in that chart, that's in the second column from the right. And then that last column in the chart that I submitted is what the total would be. All right. There are a couple things just to point out again that might be of interest based on the police department recommendations. Some of the citations that we see more frequently, retail theft, disorderly conduct, those went up a little bit. And Chief Worth indicated that was because of comparison to other jurisdictions and also just in inflation. Some of these numbers have not been changed for about 20 years, according to one of the village prosecutors, that the last go round, not all the numbers changed. So some of these numbers are, could be 20 years old or more. I don't know, exactly how old some of these numbers are. So there are some just adjustments based on time and based on changing ideas about, the possession of marijuana, things like that. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has, but I do ask for your approval for the deposit schedule.
Thank you. Comments from the trustees? Trustee Ursink?
I can make a motion.
Please.
So I move to approve resolution 2024-10 municipal ordinance violations deposit schedule.
Second.
Motion by trustee Ursink, seconded by trustee Arndorfer. Any discussion?
Can I just ask a brief question about retail theft?
Mhm.
So based on, I'm trying to think of deposit schedule versus, whether it's a, how much is it, how much do we charge? How much, this is a hard way to phrase this. How much of a deterrent is the penalty amount versus other places? Like for retail theft under $50 is 350 to 502. Is that enough to deter retail theft? Is it you have an expertise that I clearly do not. I can't even phrase this correctly. But is that,
I know what you're saying.
is it enough to make it hurt that you don't do it anymore? Or is it just,
Do we have data on that, or is there a standing, or is it more like keeping up with the neighboring so that people don't intentionally steal more here because it's cheaper?
Well, I don't know if that calculus comes into play about stealing here versus elsewhere based on the amounts. And we don't have any data in the court about deterrence. And I think maybe the police department might be more helpful on that because of what they see. What comes to court, so if somebody gets a ticket and they just pay that amount, I never see them in court.
Sure.
Who I see in court are the people who want to challenge it, want to go to trial. So, overall, the deterrent effect, I don't know, but I know that those couple, the theft and retail theft did go up kind of to try to keep up with like inflation and the comparison to other jurisdictions. What the effect of that amount is, I can't really say based on the data we have. But again, that deposit amount is, if somebody doesn't want to fight the ticket, they can just pay that amount.
right?
So they'll be paying more than they would have previously because it was $250 before. Now it would be $300 for that offense. But if that is too much money for someone, there's always, like in court, by statute, I have to consider poverty if somebody's on public benefits. If they cannot pay the amount, I consider community service. There are always other alternatives for those for whom that amount is not reasonable if they come to court and talk to me about it. So, going to your question about deterrence, I think it's a call,
Mhm.
On whether 350 is enough to be a deterrent or not. 350 was probably more of a deterrent than 250, but how many people are really looking at the deposit schedule before
Cognizant.
they steal from Metro Market? So, I don't know that how much the forfeiture is really plays into the thought process of somebody who's committing this offense. So, so I can't really.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
it's fair. I mean, it's, I guess it's at some point it's like, well, 250, to your point, 250, 350,
Right.
who cares if it's not a deterrent? It's more a question of what do we value on time for the court and everything else. I don't have any objections. It was mainly just a matter of curiosity.
I would say, yeah, in general, I mean, I think the jury is out, no pun intended, in terms of deterrence in general, like what really does work as deterrence and if that needs to be looked at. And it's definitely outside the scope of our little municipality. But from a professional standpoint, if we did want to do some type of analysis of our forfeitures or ordinance, violation penalties, is there a way that municipalities do that in a more comprehensive level rather than just, I mean, I'd hate to just take this and say, well, I think that's kind of low. You know what I mean? There should be some kind of methodical, more comprehensive way to look at it.
The court has data from every case on, what is charged, what the outcome is, and we can run reports about that. But again, the court data is only what's coming to the court. So you have the police officers before then on, their discretion on who they issue tickets to and who they don't. So the police department likely has data on their end as well. As far as, determining from that deterrence, I'm not really sure that there's an easy way to get from the data of what is here. I suppose we could compare going forward under the prior deposit schedule to the new deposit schedule, if approved, kind of compare the rates. I don't know if we'll see much difference between them. But we keep data in the court. It's just the question that you're asking about is not an easy one to have data on. But it would be something maybe, in the future to look at surrounding communities too and see, what their data is. That would be a larger project to try to, compare our data to other courts' data.
Well, thank you. That would definitely be a board initiative in a big way. So we're not going to take it up here. So if there are no further comments or discussion,
I got one last
Yes.
question.
Trustee McGovern, thank you.
Yeah, I just noticed some of them kind of look, a little bit archaic. Like there's one for not carrying a scoop while you're walking your dog. I don't know anyone who really does that. There's another for forfeiture for having an unregistered bike. Are we really giving, fines or requiring forfeitures for having an unregistered bike or not carrying a scoop while you're walking your dog?
In my 4 years as judge, I have not seen any violations in court again for those. There's also, just to point out, like there's sidewalk sprinkling. If your sprinkler goes over the sidewalk, playing in the street, there are other citations like that I have yet to see. And again, that could be something at the police department within their discretion. They're not ticketing those. It's also, within the board's discretion to eliminate those. But that's not my role. My role
Beyond
is,
the ordinance.
yeah, my role
side.
is to set the deposits for what the board has chosen to have on the books. So,
Yeah.
but Trustee McGovern, it's definitely, there's a much smaller subset of offenses that I see tickets for in court versus what is on our books. But the deposit schedule covers all of them in case someday there is a need for a ticket on that and the police in their discretion to choose to ticket that. So, so the deposit schedule covers things that are not necessarily being ticketed.
Right. Okay.
Trustee Ursing.
So you have a book in front of you that was, from 2013 or
13 and
Yep.
updated in 2018. Yeah.
2018. Will, after this change, will that then be updated? And is that available? I'd love to get a copy of whatever we have when it's updated.
So the plan would be to replace this with what I submitted to you in some form. I don't know if it'll be in like a booklet form or just stapled or, or how we'll do it. This was, I believe, printed by the police department in 2013 and 2018. So I'll work with the police department to see if it's going to, be done by the court or by the police department. But what I've asked is that these go into effect immediately. So, so for now, we'll just use, the copy printed off for the police department and hopefully come up with, some kind of more of a reference kind of document.
Be great.
But
If you do produce that, could you make sure that we get those as trustees? That'd be great to see.
absolutely.
And it's probably available online as well.
Sure.
I would think.
I'm not sure.
I have not found it. That's actually a question I have to follow up with you.
Yeah, yeah, that's for 2013. So I don't know if it.
Yeah. I
But
think
it's-
in
I don't
this
have it
day
on
and
my-
age, we could probably make it available online. Well, thank you. So if there's no further discussion, this will be a roll call vote.
Trustee Ursink,
Yes.
trustee McGovern,
Yes.
trustee Kudo,
Yes.
trustee Lynn,
Aye.
trustee Arndorfer,
Aye.
president McCaig,
Yes,
trustee Stokbrand.
Aye.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you very much.
thank you. And to those of us that had larger overreaching questions, that would be a future initiative. So bring those back. All right, our second order of business is 4B, Streetlight Replacement Implementation Plan presentation from KI Engineering. We have Mr. KI here this evening. Actually, your name, sir?
Jake Joyle, and we're with KL Engineering, actually. I think there was
Oh,
Yes.
sorry. Yeah.
that's okay. So I'm Jake Joyle with KL Engineering, project manager for the streetlight implementation plan. With me, I've got Chris Halverson, the electrical designer, for the project as well. We started working with the village, at the beginning of the year, on this endeavor. So far, we've been kind of working with them to come up with a plan for how we're going to accomplish this implementation and the streetlight conversion. In a nutshell, we're really talking about means and methods, how to most efficiently go through with this conversion, and sort of what barriers might be in place and how we might be able to get this thing off the ground. So, next slide, please. All right, so for, the purpose of today's meeting is just to kind of share our findings, what we've come across so far, what our recommendations are, and what we think the best method going forward is. So we're going to talk to you today about the existing street lighting systems that are out there now, some of the concurrent construction projects that we're going to be dealing with and facing. We're going to look at our alternative systems evaluation. That's our means sort of portion of the means and methods. The different alternatives that we looked at, the recommendation that we came up with subsequently. And then, going forward, what that construction implementation could look like over the next 5 years. Next slide, please. So this graphic here depicts the existing street lighting systems throughout the village of Shorewood. Each color represents a different electrical panel that serves the various street lights. So you can see the green, the blue, the pink, the light blue. Those are all the reaches of the different control cabinets that service the street lighting system throughout the village. So most of these were installed back in the 1970s. A lot of them have been upgraded, or maybe half of them have been upgraded. But regardless, there's still some of those old systems in place, and that's not just the controls, that's the underground infrastructure and the above ground infrastructure. Those systems had a life expectancy of around 30 to 40 years. So being that they were installed in the 70s, we are now beyond that expectancy, and we're starting to see some deterioration. The systems themselves operate as a combination of 120 240 volt systems, and you'll find those mostly on the main corridors of Capitol and Oakland. And then in the residential areas, we have 240 480 volt systems, so just a slightly higher voltage. We'll kind of get into what that means a little bit later. Overall, there's about 30 to 40 different circuits throughout the village. So each panel has multiple circuits coming out of it. Primarily, those circuits use direct bury conductors, which are also a source of common headaches, I should say. Overall, we're servicing about 1,200 street lighting units altogether. Next slide, please. So the commercial corridors, these are the 120 240 volt systems that I mentioned before on Capitol and Oakland. These have been upgraded recently. The underground has been replaced. The above ground has been converted to LED, or is in process of being converted to LED. Next slide. The Village of Shorewood Public Works Department is currently converting these to LED. Next. And these commercial corridors are therefore not included with the scope of this project. Next slide. So without having to worry about Capitol and Oakland, those are essentially being considered totally separate street lighting systems at this point for the rest of this conversation. Our focus with this project is in the residential areas. So taking out those main corridors, you see we have essentially 5 different systems that we have to worry about. We've got the northeast, we've got the big central let's call it the pink system. That's really the workhorse of the street lighting system. You can see how much area that covers. There's southeast, and a southwest as well. Next slide, please. So with these residential areas, there have been some improvements over the last few years, as the Village of Short has been able to utilize other projects to get some underground infrastructure installed. There's been new conduit and wire installed in the northwest sort of corner, as you can see, on Olive, Wood, Bartlett, Newhall, and down in the southeast on Summit and Stratford. And then, like I mentioned before, Oakland and Capitol also has been replaced recently. So the purpose of this slide is just to show that this has been on the forefront of the village's agenda. We do plan to utilize as much of this infrastructure that's been recently installed as we can. Next slide, please. Another major factor to consider is the Lake Drive reconstruction project that's going to be happening next year. That is a WISDOT project that will be reconstructing the entire corridor, which includes the street lighting. So they will be replacing all of that with new underground and new above ground, including LED fixtures. So therefore, Lake Drive is also technically not a part of the scope of this project, though we do need to consider the impacts of the WISDOT project with our overall system. Next slide, please. So that was kind of the existing systems. That's what's out there now. I'm going to jump into now what we evaluated for alternatives and what we're looking at for how to replace these street lighting systems. Again, we're focusing on the residential areas only. And the alternatives that we looked at here are 480 volt single phase systems, which is what's currently in place now. 240 volt single phase systems, which would match what's on Capitol and Oakland. It's a lower voltage. And a 277 volt three phase system, which is not currently employed by the city anywhere as far as public electricity goes. Next slide, please. So the first alternative being the 480 volt single phase system. The reason for this alternative is because with a 480 volt system, the higher voltage allows us to spread power out a lot further. Because of this, we're able to minimize the amount of control cabinets and panels that are being installed in order to control the streetlights. With fewer panels means there's fewer meter fees. We're able to use a smaller wire size. And also with fewer panels, it would mean less residents impacted by having a control cabinet in their front yard. This alternative would be consistent with the existing operations of the residential street lighting. Therefore, the impacts to the maintenance operations would be pretty minimal. It's really business as usual for maintenance. The downside to a 480 volt system is that it would be incompatible with 120, 240 volt amenities such as outlet receptacles. So really what that means is we can't plug in holiday decorations on these streetlights unless we add additional infrastructure to do so. The Capitol Drive and Oakland Drive do have these amenities included. It just would not be part of the residential system. In order to come up with an approximate cost here, we took a sample system and evaluated what that cost would be to install all new underground, all new above ground. And we came up with an approximate cost of just under $14,000 per lighting unit. Again, that includes all underground, all above ground. That's the whole kit and caboodle. So the idea is that you could just multiply that across the total amount of fixtures that are being replaced. And that comes up with your final construction cost. Next slide, please. The second evaluation that we looked at was a 240 volt single phase system. So unlike the 480 volt, the 240 cannot go quite as far. Therefore, we need quite a few more cabinets. We're looking at about 17 panels total. So that means there would be 17 residents with a cabinet in front of their house as opposed to 5. More cabinets means more meter fees. And with that lower voltage means we need a larger wire size in order to carry that voltage appropriately. The benefits that we have for this is it would be consistent with the commercial corridor operations. So once again, maintenance is minimally impacted. One added benefit is that it would simplify the material stocking. Since we're already stocking those for Capitol and Oakland, we just continue to stock them for the residential areas, and we would no longer need any 480 volt components whatsoever. Because of the added amount of panels, the larger wire size, and a couple other factors that are a little more hidden in the estimating process. We came up with an approximate cost of around $15,000 per lighting unit. And again, that's for all necessary infrastructure, underground, above ground, everything. I will note that there is a typo on the slide for the cost per lighting unit. That is before inflation was attributed to the next 5 years. We do have a table on a subsequent slide that has the correct number, but it's hovering right around $15,000 per lighting unit. Next slide, please. The third alternative that we evaluated was a 277 three-phase system. And we actually nixed this one off the evaluation pretty early. The city does not have 277 anywhere as far as power coming from the electric utility. Therefore, all existing systems would need to be overhauled. We do plan on utilizing quite a few of the existing service laterals, so all of that would need to be changed. The cost from the utility company to do such would be exorbitant. The materials that would be required would be completely different from what's already out there now. And realistically, a 277 volt, while adding capacity, meaning we can have more lights on a 277 cabinet, we can only send it as far as the voltage allows, which is very similar to 240. So we'd still be looking at about 17 panels. So honestly, it just provides little to no operational benefit for the added cost. Next slide, please. This is the table I alluded to with the correct cost per fixture. These costs are an average over 5 years. They do take into consideration utilizing some of that existing infrastructure that was installed previously. So you can see the 480 volt system, we're just under $14,000 per lighting unit, and the 240 volt system, we're just over $15,000. When you take that over the 5 years that this project is anticipated to take and converting all the street lighting units, we're looking at about $1 million plus difference between the two alternatives. Panel quantity as well is a major consideration, especially in residential areas, with the 5 compared to 17. Next slide, please. Leads us to have that recommendation of a 480 volt single phase system for the residential areas. Next slide. And again, that's lower cost, minimal impacts to maintenance, minimal impacts to residential properties. Next cost. Next slide. So with that recommendation going forward with a 480 volt single phase system, we started looking at how we're going to phase this construction wise and how we're going to actually get this thing installed. There were a couple considerations with concurrent projects that we had to take into consideration, specifically the Lake Drive project, but also there's a there's a water main project, I believe, scheduled every year. I think the exact locations of those are currently to be determined. However, we do need to work around those so that we don't have contractors doubling up in the same areas. That would be a coordination nightmare. So we will be attempting our best to avoid those water main projects with our projects. So we will phase things accordingly. As a methodology for how we're going to do this, we plan to keep the lights on for as long as possible. We're going to do this by kind of replacing the outskirts of the existing systems and working back towards that main panel so we never lose power from that main panel. The only shutdown time would really be for switching a pole over from the old pole to the new system. So we're talking maybe a week tops, ideally. There are obviously things that happen in construction that can change that. But our experience thus far in other communities has been about a week of darkness, sometimes less. And then the final thing that we're looking at with this construction implementation is how to spread that across all 5 years evenly. Given that we have 5 panels, one would think that it would be pretty easy just to do one panel at a time. However, considering the concurrent projects, considering that we need to keep the lights on, it didn't quite work out that way. So we do have a little bit of overlap with some temporary power coming into play, but either way, we were able to keep that cost difference very, very similar across all 5 years. So we don't expect there to be one year that's exorbitantly high compared to another. We're looking at a difference of maybe $300,000 between the costliest and the least costly phase of construction. Next slide, please. So phase 1, we plan to start this construction project up in the northwest quadrant. We will be replacing some of the existing systems that are on LP1, which you can see as the red dot in that northwest area. And we're going to replace that with a new cabinet proposed at Marlboro and Wilson. That is a tentative location. We still have quite a bit of coordination to do to make sure that we can actually put our cabinet there, but that's the place that we have identified thus far as being the most ideal spot. The infrastructure involved with this is going to be removal and replacement of all fixtures and lighting units. That's typical of all phases. We'll be installing new underground wire, pull boxes, et cetera. This first phase is expected to replace approximately 216 lighting units at a cost just under $3 million. Again, that overall cost per luminaire for this first phase is around $13,000. And I'll revert back to that initial number I gave you guys of being just shy of 14. That is the average over 5 years. Obviously, year one is going to be the cheapest because inflation hasn't hit yet. Next slide, please. This would be the approximate location of that cabinet that we're talking about. Again, it's at the corner of Wilson and Marlboro. And again, it's a tentative location. This is not final by any means. Next slide, please. Phase 2 is going to follow up the Lake Drive project, which should be completed by this time. The reason we selected this area was because then we can finish off extending off of that cabinet that Lake Drive project is going to be utilizing. It's going to be in the southeast, and it will be picking up additional lights that it will not service permanently. So we do have some temporary connections that would have to be made here in order to keep lights on. This project or this phase aims to convert about 202 luminaires. Cost for this one is just over $2.5 million. And that overall cost per luminaire is actually lower than year one at $13,000 because we have some existing infrastructure out there that we do plan on reusing. So there's some conduit and wire that does not need to be replaced. Next slide, please. That is the control cabinet for the Lake Drive system. That's going to remain in place. The Lake Drive system or the Lake Drive project does not plan to replace this, and neither do we. It has been recently installed. It is in very good working condition. And for reference, that will be the approximate size of all new cabinets that are installed as well. Next slide, please. Phase 3 will finish up the northwest quadrant and spill over a little bit over Oakland. Again, we're looking at a cost of just under $3 million. And that overall cost per luminaire has gone down again because there's quite a bit more infrastructure already in place out there that we hope to reuse. It offsets the inflation rate substantially and allows for a significant cost savings there. We do plan on converting 225 luminaires in the year 2027 with phase 3. Next slide, please. This is the cabinet for phase 3. This is from the 1970s. This is one of a couple that are still out there in operation. As you can tell, it is in dire need of replacement. It is operational as it stands, and it does not pose a safety hazard. So converting this in year 2027 should not be an issue. Obviously, if something changes, we will adapt accordingly. Next slide, please. Phase 4 in 2028 is proposed in that northwest quadrant. This is the red graphic. This will require a new cabinet. So this is our second new cabinet that will be installed where there wasn't one previously. This project or this phase, we're looking at a little over $3 million. We do not have any existing infrastructure with this phase, so that cost per luminaire goes up pretty good. Next. The location for that new cabinet that we've tentatively selected is on East Olive Street between Farewell and Prospect Avenue. We tried to find the least invasive place that we could within city right away. We figured near the alleyway would probably be the most realistic spot that would not make people too angry. Next slide, please. Final phase is getting rid of the workhorse that I alluded to at the beginning of this presentation. That big cabinet that feeds most of the system currently will finally be taken out of commission with the final phase in 2029. We look to convert the final 214 luminaires here to a tune of just over $3 million. And again, that overall cost per luminaire has gone up now to $15,000 due to inflation. Next slide, please. This is the behemoth of what workhorse that is currently feeding majority of the village's streetlights. The reason that this does need to be replaced is just outdated technology, and proximity to that firehouse makes maintenance extremely difficult. So we'll be replacing it in nearly the same location. The cabinet will be much smaller, more easily accessible, and obviously updated technology. Next slide, please. So overall, the construction implementation plan consists of 5 phases. Those phases are strategically selected to avoid other concurrent construction projects while also keeping the lights on as long as possible. Next slide, please. Overall, our project total, again, we went over the lighting unit cost and the cost per phase. We're looking at just shy of $15 million over the course of 5 years to complete this streetlight conversion project. Next slide, please. And that is our findings. We'll open up the floor for any questions and discussion.
Thank you very much, Trustee Kudo, and then Trustee Stokebrand.
So one, I think that this is fantastic. Thank you. This is immensely helpful, and very comprehensive. Can you mentioned very quickly the differences between, and I'm trying to look for my notes here, the 480 volt costs, sort of the legacy costs associated with the 480 volt versus what's currently being used on Capitol and Oakland,
Yes.
and us having to keep, stock or whatever. Can you sort of break down what that would be, or kind of what you think that would cost?
So you're referring to having to stockpile multiple forms of voltage operations, or?
Yeah, so the way you described it was, this would be unlike, the residential would be unlike anything you have in the commercial district. So you'd have to stock additional items. Is that all included in the costs, or that's additional cost?
Correct. That would be included in the cost. The differences between the two systems rely mostly in the control cabinets.
Okay.
It's the operational breakers, your contactors, those things all need to be rated for 480 volts. The lights themselves are universal operations, so they operate between 120 and 480.
Okay.
They'll take any sort of input. So you don't need to stock anything special in terms of lighting units, wire, conduit, pull box. None of that stuff is different. The only difference is the components internal to the controls themselves, in which case the 480 volt has five different control panels. So we would just need to stock additional 480 volt breakers, which the city should already have, as they currently are 480 volt. So
Okay.
it wouldn't change anything that the city is currently doing or the village is currently doing.
And that could potentially be a wash because you're looking at 5 cabinets as opposed to 17. So
It would take a long time for the cost of the components to match up with the amount of the panels that are being installed with 240, correct?
cool. All right, thank you.
Trustee Stokebrand.
Thank you. Thank you for this. First of all, I don't think it matters to us. We usually put our Christmas decorations just on Oakland and Capitol, right? So needing an outlet on a residential, you probably got that information. What's the lifetime we could expect from this recommendation?
So these new fixtures they're on a very similar life expectancy to that 30 to 40 years. That is in relation to the actual underground infrastructure and the poles. The lights themselves, for what's currently out there, they're high pressure sodium bulbs. Those only have like a 5-year life expectancy. You have to replace those bulbs every few years. LEDs are supposed to be 20 to 25-year cycles. So that infrastructure itself there would be quite a bit more prolonged. So overall, we should be looking at another 30 to 40 years, and that's honestly because of the wear and tear of frost, thaw, the stuff that happens in Wisconsin that we can't control. That's just going to deteriorate your underground and your concrete over time.
If someone asked me, wow, is this the best cutting edge product we can get? This looks like a very practical approach to me. But if someone were to say to me, wow, is that the best? Are we doing like the most, what would a cutting edge product be? Is there anything that would offer that would make me think twice about this practical option?
As far as above ground aesthetics and what you're looking at for lights themselves, how they produce light, no. These LED fixtures they're cutting edge. They're the most modern. The fixture themselves have actually already been approved for use back in 2023. That coincided with the Lake Drive design. So we will be matching that exact same product. We do have control over changing some of the performance metrics of that product. However, the aesthetics will be the same. So we can control color temperature. So whether it's warm or very blue, we're obviously going to lean towards the warmer side unless that's a discussion for a different day, but we can control the distribution of the light. We can control quite a few things with LED that we wouldn't be able to control with high pressure sodium. The only sort of advanced technology that could be implemented, and I say could very enthusiastically, would be an advanced control system, which would have sort of wireless controls that allow for the lights to be dimmed or adjusted manually, or wirelessly, I should say. Those systems rely on a mesh network of like node to node. So every light has to see another light in order for it to talk to the next one in the line, because it starts your communication at the hub, talks to the first light, and then that light talks to the second light, and that light talks. That would be an application for a commercial corridor, such as maybe Capitol or Oakland, where these lights are easily visible. In a residential area such as this, not all the lights can see each other. So that system would fail. So that being said, this is the most advanced technology that would be practical to install without
Okay.
installing 100 extra lights per street, you know.
Okay, I know you said this is not for this evening, but I do want to point out that residents have indicated that for the bird-friendly lights, 22K is about what they want. It looked to me like this fixture, it goes 27 to 40. So I guess obviously I would put in a pitch now for those people to go with the 27. So if this is a 5-year plan. If we bought all the lights ahead of time and rented a storage unit, would we save money? I mean, instead of like, are you planning, you talked about the inflation cost. I understand that wouldn't include labor. But if we bought all the hard equipment, you know what I'm saying? Would is that a reasonable thing to think about?
It would be reasonable if we have a place to store over 1,000 fixtures. Those poles are bulky. They take up a lot of space. The fixtures themselves would take up space. The pictures don't quite do them justice. When you actually have one of those lights down on the ground, they're big.
If only we had an example.
Oh, look at that. If only we had an
Wow.
example here.
Wow, you're right. I had no idea they were that big.
So we're storing those at Trustee Brand's house.
Anyway.
1,000 of those.
Never mind. So tell me, I'm really excited about, we were initially told $23 million for this. And I'm looking at this 15 million. And did we just this is all in. Is this construction, labor, inflation? It's a great price to me.
I believe original estimates probably included Capitol Drive in Oakland.
Oh, okay.
Those have since been converted by city forces or village forces. That is a huge component. The commercial corridors where you have to dodge utilities left and right, you're dealing with a lot of sidewalk restoration. Those are a huge cost add. When we're just boring conduit down residential streets and we're in terrace, it shrinks that cost significantly. Furthermore, the Lake Drive, which is another arguably commercial corridor, as far as vehicular traffic and the amount of utilities that you'll probably find on Lake Drive, that not being included in this project also probably significantly helps that cost figure as well.
Okay. And so most of the boring is in the roadway, like people's lawns, the parkway is.
Everything should happen within the right of way. Everything should occur within the right of way. And we do intend to bore all the conduits, so it'll be minimal impact as far as restoration is concerned. You'll have a pit on either end of what you bore, but everything between there should be undisturbed.
And would you conceivably then, we'd put on RFP for one construction company each year, or that would do it all? You do the engineering, and is your engineering cost is in here? Because you'll be engineering as you go, right? Or is that,
This is strictly construction costs. So that also probably factors into the money that you were discussing as well.
And the contract that you're here for right now ends when?
It ends So the contract that we are currently working through includes the implementation plan, which is commencing, the design of year one, construction of year one, and the design of year two. So it takes us through the end of 2025, as construction for 2022 will happen in the summer of 26.
Okay. So then we would probably need another engineering company, or you could be somebody else.
Well, yeah, there'll have to be a renewal there.
So recall, you approved a 5-year plan with KL. We structured that contract with a master task order. And then there were a master contract, like an umbrella contract, and then there will be task orders for specific components. So the first task orders included, as Jake mentioned, the implementation plan, and then engineering for years 1 and 2, and construction observation and management for year 1. We did that largely because of known costs over that time period. It's not really to either party's benefit to attempt to identify labor costs 5 years out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Trustee Ursink.
Yep. So we're talking about a 30-year lifespan. That's where we were then, and that's where we'll be in the future. Where we did direct bury these lines, and we will now be going through and adding conduit and then running those lines to the conduit. Do you see any benefit to that? I mean, do you see we could, so in the future when we have to do this again, it's going to be much less invasive than what we're doing right now. It's going to be pulling cable, replacing cable. And can we squeeze out more life because it will be in conduit as opposed to direct bury?
Yeah, absolutely.
So a cheaper cost, the cost will be brought down in the future when we need to replace this in 30 years from now.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
Theoretically, the main source of deterioration will be the concrete bases that the lights sit on.
Gotcha. Okay.
Theoretically, the underground, it's in PVC conduit. That shouldn't degrade. And the wire that gets installed is also direct bury rated wire. So it doesn't have to be in conduit. The conduit is honestly a mechanism for troubleshooting. And it just makes things much easier in the future. So those do fill up with water. Water does find its way into ruining everything. So you will need to pull new wire at some point, but yeah, it does.
And
does
then,
do that.
looking at these boxes, we have boxes from the 70s. They from those pictures, they just look decrepit and outdated. Box technology, that technology has probably come a very long way in that time. Do you feel that we're setting ourselves up properly for the future for the next 30, 40 years with the boxes that we will be installing? Do you see that technology changing even more from where it is today to where it's going to be in, 2050, 2070?
The box technology has not changed much since I started
Yeah.
engineering. So I don't foresee that changing again. I mean, it's stainless steel components. It's all weather rated, NEMA rated for withstanding storms.
Mhm.
Again, perfect world. Nothing should ever get in that box. Should be perfect for however long you want it to be.
Right.
But nothing has come out that would make me think that that's going to change.
Yeah. I think the goal of this is to really set ourselves up or the community up for the future. So we're not in the situation we are right now where we're ripping out cable that's
Mhm.
just been buried in there and trying to just have a little bit more foresight to the future when we have to do this again. So thank you. Great presentation, by the way. Thank you.
Other questions? Trustee Kudo?
I just have a couple questions. If everyone else is good. When we first started having this conversation about the streetlights, some of the conversation had to do with safety. A number of the lighting systems that we had now were failing at a sort of consistent rate. Have there been any conversations with the police department about, the phases, 1 through 5? Or there's some phases that are failing more frequently than others? I know that when you were discussing this, one of the large components of why we were phasing them in the years that we were phasing them was because it was sort of an ease based on other programs that were happening or other projects that were happening. Are we comfortable with the sort of need versus ease argument of the phasing? Do we need to change some streetlights in some areas right away because they are constantly failing, but it's not very easy to do it versus late drive? You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So, where are we? I want to make sure that we thought about it and that, you know, that we have a good answer when someone from the public says, my streetlights are on all the time.
So the Northeast has been a problem
Okay.
for a while. Last winter, I probably spent most of the winter up there digging around, trying to find issues with that. The entire village is an issue.
Yeah.
So I get phone calls about everywhere. So we have to start somewhere.
Okay.
So, and considering the fact the Northwest also comes out of that Lake Bluff cabinet, that's really, really old.
Right.
So I would start.
Okay. I just
I
want
mean, where we're starting makes sense to me.
we're going to get asked why
Mhm.
here,
Oh, yeah.
why not there? So, if there's if the viable, you know, the argument from us would be,
Right.
it's easier. There's still a problem here.
Mm-hmm.
You have to.
I mean, if I lived on a
so-
block where my block was out constantly because of.
I'm in the
whatever, I get
Northeast.
it.
My
so I
block
can-
is
yeah,
out
I can
So-
tell you, my
yeah.
block is out all the time.
Yeah.
So is mine, and I'm on the first of the list. but-
No, I mean, yeah.
We're all the most important blocks, just so you know.
And Kathy's too.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, trustee Lynn, Arndorfer, McGovern.
Nothing. Excellent presentation. Thank you. Very thorough.
Okay.
Thank you all for the time.
The only question I have, is there a clap on, clap off? Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Kidding.
yeah.
I do have a question about legacy costs. So with the new infrastructure, is it cheaper to operate per year? Not having bulbs versus, bulbs versus LED, like, are we gonna see some savings down the road?
Yeah, it's very hard to quantify that savings. But if you just look at the luminaire replacement cycles themselves, luminaires being the actual light fixture,
Sure.
the ones that are out there currently are about a 5-year replacement cycle. They typically get replaced quicker than that, so like every 3 years. Sure, Dan seems out there constantly replacing bulbs, I'm sure. LEDs, like I said, they should be on a 20 to 25 year cycle. You do have to clean them every so often because they just do get covered in dirt and grime over time, but
I'm happy to power wash my part
Yeah.
of my house.
Little
Okay.
League, swim club,
Yeah, I
volunteer.
mean, you seem like
Community service, where's Judge? Okay, sorry.
great
It's getting late,
opportunities.
guys.
Community. Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. So there's no action on that this evening, so we can move on to the consent agenda.
yeah.
You can stay.
Is there a motion to
Nice to meet you as well. Thank you.
to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by trustee Ursink, seconded by trustee Lynn. Any discussion?
Like to,
Yes.
Pull item B as in Betty.
B as in Betty. Anything else? All right, motion to, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda with the exception of 5B as in Betty, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 6, items removed from the consent agenda. 5B, consider village board meeting minutes, May 20th, 2024. Trustee Stokebrand.
Yeah, on number 6, I just wanted, it said trustee requested language. That would be me taking responsibility. And then I just on 6C as in cat, what would include business improvement district to improvement district, just to make it clear that it was the bid. Under 9, there's 2 different numbers for years for EAB is Emerald Ash Borer. If we could add that to EAB, if someone's reading the minutes and doesn't understand, EAB is Emerald Ash Borer. And then one place it says 2025 to 27 service levels, another place it says 2025 to 29. I think it's the latter. Just so they're consistent. And with that, I would move to approve the minutes of May 20th, 2024.
Second.
On the Emerald Ash Borer that was presented last, was that a 5-year? You recall? It was, okay. Thank you.
I will still second.
All right, motion by trustee Stokebrand, seconded by trustee Kudo. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to citizens to be heard. This item is for matters not on the agenda this evening. Are there any citizens to be heard? Or am I, no, public hearing. I didn't put my glasses down. So item 7, public hearing. Typically we don't have any, but we do have one this evening. It is a public hearing to discuss an ordinance to amend the regulations pertaining to principal uses permitted in the MX districts as detailed in 535-25 of the zoning code. At this time, I will open up the public hearing. It is 8:27. All those who would like to speak on this matter can approach the microphone, say your name and address. Yeah, it could be the applicant, right? I mean, we might also ask questions of the applicant, but I would think if the applicant wanted to speak, this would be the time. Would you agree with that, Direct?
Could I get my
Procedure?
presentation first and then they can fill in perhaps?
Oh, I apologize. I think we do usually reverse it, so I apologize. We usually do indicate that there'll be a presentation first and then we'll open the public hearing. So pause on the public hearing. Sorry about that I really have to either keep these glasses on or off. All right, so Director Griepenschlag is going to make a presentation this evening that summarizes the information. After that, Trustee Lynn, I've asked Trustee Lynn to summarize the outcome of the Plan Commission meeting the other night. I, as a Plan Commission member, can also speak, and maybe that's better saved till the discussion. I don't know, but it's general information.
So thank you, President McKeag. So yes, this is a brief presentation just to supplement what the memo that's in your packet. First slide, please. So what is before us tonight, later on the agenda, is an amendment to a request to amend the regulations pertaining to principal uses in the MX districts. Just for reference, MX is a commercial district relating to mixed use along Oakland and Capitol. Currently, office uses, including mental health practitioners, are not permitted within the first 20 feet of occupied space. What is permitted in that first 20 feet of occupied space are retail sales, consumer services such as barbers and nail salons, eating and drinking, and artisan production, so artist studios, things of that nature. That regulation was crafted throughout 2022 and adopted in 2023 through the commercial zoning update. The intent of that commercial zoning update was to create active streets and civic spaces during the day and into the evening through a mix of uses in these particular corridors and districts. Implementation was done by the creation of an MX zone and created clusters of storefront activity where, quote, walkable storefront buildings generally include shopping, eating and drinking, and services behind storefront windows. As I mentioned, that was adopted in 2023. Within the memo, it does reference that the village adopted the zoning regulations, but didn't necessarily follow that up with any sort of financial implementation tools or recruitment methods. And so, as you'll hear later on, the applicant has suggested that it's been difficult to transition their particular space, which was an office use, into a non-office use moving forward. Next slide. So this is just the principal use table that was created. The MX districts are 1 and 2, 1 being the up to 4 stories and 2 being up to 5 stories. They have the same use regulations. As you can see in the row heading, office uses are only permitted in upper stories and the rear of the ground story based on that symbol. The applicant is requesting that we modify that to allow them in the first 20 feet of that storefront. Next slide. This is the zoning map of the village. As I mentioned, the MX districts are located along Capitol and Oakland. They are the light lavender colors. They were produced primarily in clusters around intersections. Next slide. The requested amendment is on behalf of the applicant. They are asking that the village permit office uses in the MX district as long as they are not located within 30 feet of a street corner. That 30 feet of a street corner was based on a discussion that I had early on with the applicant where they acknowledged the goal of the corridor or of the commercial zoning update was to create more active uses, and they acknowledged that corners they thought still should be kept within that regulation. Their space does not fall under that, so they were fine with including that in their request. Within the packet, I did discuss that I did reach out to our former consultant just for some suggestions on how to move forward with this. She confirmed that my reading of the code was accurate. She did suggest that there were ways to limit that impact. And so I went to the drawing board and identified some. So we would have the option to permit office uses, but limit their impact by not allowing them within a greater distance of the street corner. As noted, the applicant is requesting 30 feet, but if you wanted a greater impact and to create a more robust corner, you could perhaps go to 60 feet. You could also choose to implement the regulation only in long buildings over 120 feet. As I mentioned in my memo, the zoning code does have current allocations for buildings of 120 feet or longer. They're not necessarily rated to use, they're more with design. But similarly, we could carve out regulations different for longer buildings, acknowledging that those longer buildings have a lot more commercial space that needs to get rented out. And then lastly, you could also just allow a certain percentage or linear feet of the frontage within those buildings. So there were three things that were discussed within the Plan Commission deliberation and recommendation. The Plan Commission did ultimately recommend an option with these three conditions within them. It also did provide a letter of support asking that the village board consider the requested amendment with conditions. They didn't specify which conditions, but they did suggest that conditions seem to be a logical way to go. Next slide. Just for your reference, the applicant is the property owner of 4485 North Oakland Avenue. It is the southern portion of the retail space of the building seen on the upper right corner. It was formerly occupied by Stoll Associates, which was an office space. It has been vacant since 2022, which is long enough that it can no longer be grandfathered into the former code. The property owner has an office use, a mental health practitioner desiring to move into the space. A mental health practitioner is considered an office use in the current code. Current code would not allow them to be located in the first 20 feet of that storefront, which is not agreeable to that office, prospective office tenant. So the applicant is seeking a zoning amendment to change that. Next slide. This, just for your reference, is the current configuration of how that southern tenant space is built out. As you can see, it is largely built out with office spaces. The yellow space in the front represents that 20 feet that would not be allowed under the current code. Currently, I believe that is 3, if not 4 office spaces. So under the current code, they would have to remove those offices from the potential lease and, rent them out to other retail or other type of uses. Once again, the applicant or the prospective tenant has suggested they're not willing to do that. They want to have access to the sunlight from the street. And so they don't want that front space removed from the total space that's there. But this, just for your reference, is how it's laid out internally. Next slide. Like I said, the current building is split into 2 commercial tenant spaces. Valis LLC owns the southern portion, which is the space that we're considering for potential new client. The lobby of that space is approximately 20 feet or 11% of that storefront. The occupied storefront, which is currently offices, is 79 feet or 44.72% of the building. And then the northern tenant space is occupied storefront currently with a Metropolitan Pain Clinic. Next slide. This, just for your reference, is a cutout of that particular corner. So Kensington and Oakland was one of the areas identified for a higher activity cluster. And so modifying the code to allow an office use of it, whatever conditions that we might discuss would impact the general nature of what uses could be permitted there. Next slide. And so lastly, this is just an overview of the review and approval process. We had conversations with the applicant well before April 5th, but on April 5th, they submitted their application. That application was introduced to the Plan Commission on April 24th. For the code, it is just an introduction for the first meeting. The second meeting on May 28th is where they rendered their recommendation, which I already mentioned, including the 3 conditions. We are here tonight at the June 3rd public hearing. That public hearing was published twice in the official newspaper on May 15th and May 22nd, so the public is aware of this conversation currently tonight. And then a neighborhood notice was also sent to any property owner within 250 feet of a space zoned MX. That went to approximately 450, I believe, property owners. That was mailed out on May 23rd, which was 10 days prior to consideration of tonight's hearing. Next step after the public hearing in this particular agenda item will be village board consideration under item 9. I believe that is the end of my presentation. There's one.
And I would also note that you received, the office received multiple letters in support or communications in support, which are all included in our packet this evening.
Correct.
Have you received any additional ones that need to be read into the record?
We did receive one. I believe Toya has it when that is necessary.
Okay. I think to keep it consistent, or it makes sense to me to read that into the record now as part of the presentation. And then we'll go to public hearing and we'll save the plan commission update for when we consider it. So sorry, I was a little rattled on that.
So this came today at 7:35 a.m. From Heather Lang, Lang. Hi, Bart. This email is on behalf of my parents, Tom and Debbie Lang, who reside at 1811 East Kenmore Place in Shorewood, Wisconsin. In advance of tonight's public hearing, my parents wish to express their support for the proposed ordinance that would allow the office uses to occupy the entire first floor buildings located in the village mixed use district. Feel free to contact me with any questions. Wishing you a good day ahead, Heather.
Thank you, Clerk Harrell. All right, thank you for that presentation. At this time, we would welcome any members of the public who would like to be heard on this matter. I will reopen the public hearing at 8:38 p.m. And if you say your name and your address and speak very loudly into the microphone.
Okay. Andrew Stefanich, 790 North Water Street, Suite 1800, Milwaukee, 53202. So your packages are very comprehensive. I won't spend a lot of your time on the whole process and everything, but I did want to touch briefly on how we got to where we are today. So I'm here representing my mother, who's a co-owner, with Phyllis Brostoff, who is here, who will also be speaking after me. They moved their offices there in 2005 when the building was built. They occupied the space for 17 years. Eventually, the business was sold, and then the new buyer of the business relocated the offices. And so for the last 2 years and 3 months, the space has been vacant and marketed. We've had 3 brokers working on the assignment. 2 are retail brokers. One's an office broker. The commercial industry is a little different in that, that we don't just put up a sign, we actively make calls. As an example, we called all the hardware shops to see if there was a hardware group because we thought hardware was a perfect use for the space, and didn't get any takers. So we've been very active in marketing the space for over 2 years. This entire time we've gotten or received 1 letter of intent from a retailer who wanted 1,800 square feet. This is a bigger space, it's about 5,000 square feet. But to get to there, the retail is pretty financially challenging. It's about $40 a square foot. We got 2 quotes, which totals $218,000 to white box the space to convert it to retail. Then from there, you've got tenant improvement allowance to give the tenants to build out the space from the white box. So it's pretty expensive, and the retail rents are about the same as the office rents. So with that added expense, you don't see an uptick in the rents. The other thing to keep in mind is there's some really, really great retail along Oakland, and a lot of that was TIF'd. It was either an apartment building where the developer could offset the first floor commercial space with the apartments. I think even in one case, Collectivo received TIF for the build out specifically. So we just don't have that luxury here at our space. I think that's all I have, but Phyllis, you want to say a couple things?
With this.
Mm-hmm.
So my name is Phyllis Brostoff, Brostoff. My address is 3431 North Lake Drive, Milwaukee, 53211. And I don't want to ramble here. So first of all, we'd like to thank Bart for his professionalism and extremely helpful information and sharing, and us becoming aware and understanding the whole process of the zoning code and the current situation. So we thank you. We're asking for this amendment because the zoning code does not have a method to request an exception, which might be an exceptional situation for zoning codes, but that's the situation with this one. So when Valerie and I bought this space in 2005, it was also unique in that it's condo office space, which might be the only condo office space in Milwaukee County. I don't know, but it was an unusual situation for us to be able to make that investment for our business. So our business made that investment, but it was sold, as Andrew said, at the end of 2021. I mean, at the end of 2017, and then it was resold and they ended their occupancy at in middle of 2022. We have a lease that's ready to be signed with a tenant who has given notice actually to their current landlord. We have financing in place, which was not that easy to find. We had to go to 3 banks to find anybody willing to finance something like this under the current financial situation with interest rates and whatnot. We've been on the market, as Andrew already said, for 2 years, during which money has become much more expensive and tenants scarcer. The complex changes from the COVID and all this sort of thing going on. And finally, our brokers found what to me was going to be an ideal tenant, this mental health clinic, to continue the use that we had of a social service organization helping the public. Our agency provided care to elderly people and disabled adults. And by the way, we've been in Shorewood since 1986. We actually got an award from Shorewood about 15 years ago for being in business in Shorewood for 25 years. So we would like our request is very simple. Please approve either our requested amendment or the modification, the substitute amendment that Bart spoke to that was approved at the Plan Commission and I think recommended by the bid after the several years that we've put into trying to get this space rented. So we appreciate any questions and we're happy to answer either Andrew or I happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Please come forward.
Good evening. My name's Tom Defke, DEFFKE, address 1717 East Kensington Boulevard, Unit 202. Essentially, I live above Phyllis's space, and the president of the Metropolitan Condo Association. We represent 22 condo owners. Our building, near as I can figure, contributes about $200,000 or more per year in property taxes. Throughout the years, Phyllis and Valerie were great neighbors, and we really have been kind of sad to look at that open office space all these years, or these last 2 years. So we'd really appreciate some movement. We really don't want a bar underneath us where we live or a restaurant. It's not suited for that. So I would appreciate if you could move this along as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is one comment online, Miss Larman.
Okay. Ms. Larman, would you can come off mute and say your name and address, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name's Linda Larman, 1811 East Elmdale Court. So I'm one of the people who's very close to Oakland in the 250 feet area. So I got one of the notices, as well as seeing information about this on the website. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm glad to hear that things seem to be going in the direction of approving the applicant's request. As I understand it, last year when the zoning changes were approved, there was the idea that they would be reevaluated at around this time. And I'm glad to see this change going through because as a very nearby resident of Oakland and Capitol, I am all in favor of quiet uses. We are very interested in the peaceful enjoyment of our properties and in maintaining our property values. And there's concern, I can't directly speak for anyone else on my street, but we've had some conversations and there's concern that our street may be changing and becoming a sort of a noisy, busier street. I would say that people are attracted to Shorewood and once here enjoy living here. I'm one of those people because it's green, it's safe, it's a lovely place to raise children. We have good schools and it's a lovely place to grow old. Reimagining Oakland and Capitol as something like the Deer District is just not the way to go. It's interesting and somewhat disturbing to me, or more than somewhat disturbing, it is disturbing to me, that some have cited the Ascension Clinic as a negative to the neighborhood. I think that came up last year and it may have come up again this year in connection with the applicant's request. I would strongly disagree with that. On our street, we contend with noise, traffic, and parking issues from 2 bars, from Walgreens, and from a variety of other businesses, although those other businesses are less intense. Amid all that, Ascension actually is an asset because it's a quiet business that doesn't create disruptions to us residents. Without disparaging the consultants who worked on last year's zoning change or disparaging anyone else, I think it's time to start paying a bit less attention to consultants and more attention to real people. Also, it should not be incumbent on us residents who are near Oakland or Capitol to identify, research, and testify on all the changes that affect us. Yes, we get notices. Many of us are diligent about reading the village manager's memo and trying in other ways to keep abreast of developments, but it's hard stuff to figure out what's going on and then to research to learn more about what's going on and to testify or submit statements on everything. So I would call on the village board, the plan commission, and the staff when considering any change on Oakland or Capitol that affects nearby residents to put yourselves in our shoes or really in our homes as 24-hour residents in the nearby homes and make our interests a priority at the earliest possible stage and throughout the process of any significant change that's happening on Oakland or Capitol and affects the nearby residents. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Ekman?
Hi, Ellen Ekman, Ellen Ekman, 2500 East Beverly. I've come to speak in behalf of the proposal that's in front of you tonight. And the mention of the condo is very important because I was on the CDA and the village board when this came forward. Now, you can remember what year it is better than I can, but the point was that when Phyllis and Valerie came to the CDA meeting in that little office, we were, as a group, pleased to have them staying in Shorewood because we knew from our own work that they had moved from Oakland to what is now the hub and, now wanted to stay in a bigger place. And they wanted to go into a structure that they would own as a condo business. That's very unusual. We were not sure who would be interested in doing that at the time. So here was someone who was willing to take on a good portion of it as a way to really make it permanent, and they stayed in it. At the time they were in business, strong supporters of activities in Shorewood. Often saw Stowell Associates on all kinds of activities. So this has been a very, very strong business and very much gave back. And of course, the people who work in this kind of office building certainly make use of all of the activities around them, whether it's going to the coffee shop, picking up groceries on the way home, buying something else, all the kinds of things that people do when they're working and then leaving the site, or not leaving the site, working and going home. So I want very much to put that sort of history out there. And I think that having the similar kind of structure complements the other business will actually improve the property because it won't be empty any longer. And we will actually have something in a strong position. So I hope that it'll go forward tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in person or online? All right. Seeing none, hearing none, I will close the public hearing at 8:52 PM. Thank you. So with that, we now have citizens to be heard. This item is for matters not on the agenda. Is there anyone who would like to be heard this evening? All right, I'm not seeing anyone. So we will move on to item 9, which is new business. I'm wondering if it's possible to take 9B first, since we have members of the public here that have interest in that item. Does everyone agree to that?
Agree.
Okay. All right, so we'll take 9B, ordinance 3064, an ordinance to amend the regulations pertaining to principal uses permitted in the MX districts as detailed in 535-25 of the zoning code. In addition to the presentation and the letters of support that were provided in our materials this evening, as I'm assuming everyone has read those and got their questions answered. We also have a recommendation to approve from the Plan Commission from last week. I've asked Trustee Lynn to summarize that conversation or that discussion and recommendation. There were 3 yes votes, a no vote, and an abstention. There is an email that was forwarded from Commissioner Flynn Post, who abstained from the vote. And I asked her to provide her reasoning, her position if she felt comfortable to, because abstentions are sometimes less clear than a no vote. And so I'm hoping everybody received that. If you didn't, we can read it into the record. So with Trustee Lynn, and then after Trustee Lynn, I can speak as a member of the Plan Commission and the chair as well. And then we will open it up for discussion.
I'll keep my comments brief. I mean, I think the presentation and the public comment kind of laid out the history of the situation. You know, the discussion at the Plan Commission meeting was, you know, largely around, you know, the impact between if we approve changing the zoning code for the whole thing, the whole district, with the exception of the corners, or if we do this more narrowed approach, which on our motions, if you see, is the third one down. The more narrowed approach basically highlights larger buildings that have a lot more space to fill. And I think in Director Rubentrop's presentation, the image of the first 20 feet versus that entire office kind of goes to show what some of these buildings are dealing with in terms of trying to find a retail specific use. It's just so much more difficult for those spaces to find a retail specific use. So the question kind of comes to us is how strict do we want to be on those spaces specifically? And the Plan Commission, you know, decided ultimately, if we look at those spaces specifically and we allow those spaces to have non-retail use, there's minimal detriment to the village. If any, it would help fill in those spaces. And not only this, you know, applicant, but anybody else in the future, and help kind of fill space in Shorewood so that we don't have empty uses. The main concerns were if it is narrow, this kind of more narrowed focus, is that picking winners and losers? Well, the answer to that is that that's what zoning does in the first place. So yes, in that it is a zoning code. But other than that, there's no specific concern with it being a narrow focus like this. The second concern was, well, this is still kind of new. Should we just let it be as it is? But the concern is if we let this be this time, there will be somebody in the future and in the future and in the future, you know, asking, you know, for these types of changes. And so I think if we look at just this narrow focus, which was supported by the bid, supported by the community, resolves the applicant's issue and highlights really those specific buildings that are difficult to fill with retail, I think it's an extremely reasonable update to our hybrid zoning code.
Thank you. And I'll fill in with the no vote was from Commissioner Pollack, who felt that, why have a code if you're going to change it every time somebody asks, which is a fair question. And so I think that basically my contribution to this was that when the zoning was approved last year, this particular aspect of the code I thought was overly restrictive at the time. I didn't vote against the whole zoning code because I believe in the group process, and I believed that all the hours of discussion, that it was very thoughtful, intentional discussion, and that we made the commitment that we would reevaluate it. But at the time, I did think it was overregulated. And I think the fact that this is coming forward to us within the year indicates that, in theory, form-based code is wonderful, and the hybrid code process that we went through is wonderful, and the intention and the reflection that the working group took was excellent. I think that when it comes to trying to activate different spaces in a commercial district of our size, where half of our radius is the lake, and so we're always going to be limited by our retail area. I don't think that theory and application really always match up. So in my experience of 10 years on the board, a more being reasonable in our application of code, I think, gets us much further than being as theoretical and stringent about code. It also, I think, a plan commission, its job is to look at code and use much more narrowly than a village board that thinks about the people impact, and are we putting code before people and businesses and services. There was a lot of support for the type of service that's going in. And then finally, just as somebody, I'm actually Linda Larman's neighbor, and I actually live closer to Oakland than she does. And I do all my errands on foot, and I virtually do all of my, I used to go to Ascension, but my health insurance changed. So now I can't go across the street to the doctor, but otherwise I wouldn't drive. I wouldn't leave town for anything. And I can tell you that when I walk and do my errands, the difference between the business storefronts don't affect me one way or another. It is, unless there are people out eating on the street, the experience of going past I would say 80% of the storefronts all along Oakland and Capitol, they feel the same no matter what the use is. And I'm just happy that all those services are there because I make use or somebody does. So those kinds of things I just think are from the plan, bringing together the plan commission role and the village board role. I just wanted to put that out there for consideration. So at this time, and I also I'm glad that you brought up the condo. I think that's another thing, is that's getting into this particular situation, which I don't think that we should look at zoning code amendments for particular situations. But it is true that if you have condo businesses in your community, those are not commercial owners that can balance leases that are making a higher profit than not. This is they own one piece of property within a larger building and have to fill all of it. So it's not multiple tenants that you're looking at. And that's just a function of, we have some buildings that are similar sizes, but they actually have different kind of economic bases tied to them. So anyway, with that, I will open it up to the trustees for questions. I know this is very technical if you haven't been following it at the Plan Commission level. So questions and then discussion.
Just had a quick question for Bart. And just to clarify, so if this were implemented, what would the impact hypothetically be on, say, the Ascension building, for instance, if that were to change, if that were to come up down the line?
If you were to approve the amendment as recommended by the Plan Commission, the Ascension building is not long enough to qualify for an exemption. So the 120 feet was defined by the consultant as the typical storefront being 30 feet. So a 4-tenant building being 120 feet was the differentiation of a long building versus a smaller or more typical building. The Ascension building, I believe, is 113 feet. So this, if adopted as recommended by the Plan Commission, it wouldn't be impacted. If adopted as the applicant has requested, then it would allow for that space to become an office use in the future. I actually don't have it in front of me. I'm not even sure if Ascension building is zoned MX. It probably is. It also could be office already. But yeah, as the applicant is requesting, it's a mid-block building. So mid-block buildings and the applicant's request could become office uses. Just the corners would not be. But in the Plan Commission's version, it would have to be a large building, which I believe there's maybe approximately 10. I believe I provided the addresses of the ones I found this afternoon. So the Ascension building in my current review would not be impacted.
Okay, yeah, and some of those buildings that would be, are not realistic for that, so like Metro Market or
Correct.
something like. All right, thank you.
So I have a follow-up question for Bert.
Mhm.
Since the new zoning code has been implemented, how many other conversations have you had with potential business owners or tenants that would have relocated or done something in Shorewood had it not been for the change in zoning?
We had one, which I referenced in my response, that was looking to move into the former Wells Fargo bank at
The arcade?
Yeah, 4015. I don't exactly know why they chose not to. I can tell you they did not like the requirement to have a 20-foot retail component in front of them. I don't know if that was the reason why they ultimately withdrew their application, but that's the only one in the last year since the code has been adopted that has been discussed or challenged. The other one that comes to mind is the former Bonobo American Bistro on the north end of the village that is zoned MX. And when the new tenant moved in there, it's a interior design firm. We discussed with them that their frontage had to be retail. Thankfully, that worked for them because they wanted to do retail anyways. But yeah, they chose, and were going to anyways, to put their offices in the back and allow that 20-foot to be in the front. They thought it made complete sense. That's what attracted them to the building in the first place, was to have, storefront windows and attract people in there. So those are the two tenants that come to mind in spaces like that had discussions in the last year. And then obviously this one before us tonight.
Okay.
Trustee Lynn.
The other thing that kind of, came up was too, is that this is it. It's not like either or. We're not saying only offices in those spaces going forward. Any of these still absolutely could be a retail space if it's the right use for the space. So it's really just to add a little extra availability.
Any other comments, questions? Trustee Ursink?
Yeah, I just want to make a note that, we spent a good amount of time working with the consultant. So before it said, a consultant made this code, but it was actually a very large group of residents, trustees, different stakeholders in the community that really worked on this. And, this is, this is a really tough decision to make, because when you sit down, you dedicate all this time to try to re-envision your community. You do it with intention, and you want to stick behind that, right? You want to make sure that, the first person that comes to you and says, this isn't going to work for me, you've got to change it. We don't all just sit there and say, okay, we got to change it. You got to see it through. You got to make it work. In this case, we have the person that's like the hardest to say no to, right? I mean, we have somebody that's been a great resident in the community, or a great community person that's been in business for a long time, that's done nothing but amazing things for the community, which makes it extremely hard to kind of say no to. Seeing that this spot in my mind is an ideal place for retail. Is it an ideal place for a restaurant or a bar? Probably not. I would say not at all, but it's an ideal space for some sort of retail. And I think everybody here makes a good point, but I just want to make a note that there were a lot of people that sat down, contributed to this from residents that are all residents here, right? I mean, I take kind of issue with the fact that people say this is just a consultant, and it was nothing like that. There was so many contributions, so much time spent in these meetings that Trustee Stokebrand and I sat on. I mean, we put a lot of energy into making this happen. As being a past bid board president and being a part of the bid, we have such a disjointed business community, right? It's office space here, it's the restaurant here, it's, retail over here, and I think our real goal is to try to narrow that down and try to get more sort of walkable space and shoppable space. Is it going to work? we don't really know, and it looks like we're not really willing to find out. I'm kind of came into this with an open mind, and it looks like, the majority of our board is going to be in favor of these changes. I feel like I'm probably going in that direction as well, but I just have to say it's frustrating as somebody that's put a lot of time and energy into this process to just say that right off the bat, this is, we're not going to see it through, and, if you want change, sometimes you have to make tough decisions and you have to see things through. And in this case, it looks like we're not going to see this thing through. But with that said, I think we're getting a good business that really services our community, and it's going to be great for it. I always am excited to see for sale or for lease signs taken down from our business community. So I think in that respect, it's going to be fantastic to operate and to populate the space. Really excited about that. Just not so excited that we're already back here in this stage, kind of asking for an amendment to something that we put so much time and energy into. So just wanted to share that.
So
If I may, I just want to reiterate, I know, and that's exactly why I did vote yes for it, because of all that time and effort. But I do recall that this particular, like that building, especially in terms of the MS district and that aspect of the code, was a sticking point. And it wasn't there. It was really like, is this worth it? And there were other, like the dentist there were just a couple that were real sticking points. So I would reframe it to be, and I'm sure if I had taken the time and been the working group, and thank you very much for doing that, I might feel frustrated too. But I also think that the reality is, like, it's just one part of the code, and it was a sticking point and an ongoing debate that entire time too. So it's
I feel guilty when there's somebody that comes in the community or somebody that brings this up, like a Metro Market, that, I feel like I can say, well, I'm going to turn that down, but now they're going to go back and say, well, you didn't turn this, like, I feel bad picking and choosing, because we've got the most incredible person here that you can't say no to. But, there are going to be people that we're easily going to be able to say no to. And
I could say no to this person if I felt it wasn't reasonable. But anyway, go ahead, Trustee Kudo.
No, I mean, I was on the plan commission. I was actually chaired the plan commission meeting the day that this was introduced. And there was a lot of back and forth about picking winners and losers, and about letting the process that so many people had worked so long on sort of come to fruition, right? And that this had been less than a year. I mean, Commissioner Wickland talked about picking winners and losers. I know I did. My concern here is take away all, as an elected official, right? And this is a change. Take away, in my mind, I have to take away all of the factors that are personal or longstanding within the village. Is this a good business? Absolutely. Is it a longstanding business? Absolutely. Are they longstanding members of the community? Absolutely. Does that mean that we should treat them any differently than anybody else that's coming to this community? Absolutely not. Right. So, I mean, I get where you're coming from when we talk about this versus a Metro Market or an arcade or something else. We just can't apply the rules based on, or make changes based on factors that are not in the best interest of the village. And I don't think that this change, looking at this property as well as other properties in the MX district, is in benefit to the village of Shorewood. We spent a long time going back and forth, not only on the committee, but on the board, on the plan commission, discussing all this stuff. And it's been, 16 months since its implementation. And now we're just going to sort of toss it aside. I mean, I live, to those who, discuss it's getting too loud on Oakland Avenue or whatever. I live on Oakland, or on Lake Bluff and Kramer. I'm 4 houses in from Oakland Avenue. When I bought my house, I knew I was moving closer to a business district, and that's one of the reasons I bought the house. Have I loved everything that's gone up over there? I think we can all agree I haven't. But I recognize that is what it is, right? I wanted to live close to Oakland so I could walk to things, I could do things. And again, that part of that street is by and large kind of a dead zone, right? When you cross Kensington going south on Oakland, the left side, certainly Kensington Liquor used to be, used to be a great spot. It used to be activated all the time. Cloud Red is great and is activated all the time. But the other side of the street in that part is just, there's nothing there. And when we talked about all of this, we talked about wanting to engage and wanting to open up Oakland Avenue. It doesn't have to be a bar. It doesn't have to be a restaurant. There are no requirements for that. But I think that, 1 year of looking for a tenant under these new requirements from the village, we don't control the market, right? We are the village board and we set policy to put forth what we want to see in the village of Shorewood. And we did that. And we asked the community to do that. And they did that. And so, with regards to the sort of hybrid model that Art mentioned that was passed by the Plan Commission, it's one thing to pick winners and losers between different districts. In my mind, it's an entirely different thing to pick winners and losers between big businesses and small businesses, right? Between 120-foot businesses and 113-foot businesses. At some point we have to sort of draw a line, and we did that as a community. So for that reason, for all the other reasons that we've talked about, for all the people that were part of these committees and made these votes and all these tough votes, I'm going to vote no, because I want to see this through. I want to see what this can do in Shorewood long term. And I don't think it's unreasonable what we're asking for from the business owners in that street.
If you may, I'm going to finish taking comments from if you could hold. Thanks.
Thank you. I think I voted against this, even though I sat through all those meetings, but I'm pretty sure I voted against the update. And this is one of the reasons why I felt that the new code was too restrictive, too unrealistic, and it didn't follow enough of resident concerns about, who we are and the community we live in. I'm concerned about the size issue, that we would be discriminating against a smaller business owner. And so I have an issue with, making it easier for a large business to get a break than a small, someone who owns a property that's a smaller storefront. That doesn't seem fair to me. The reality of owning property, it seems to me you have to be aware of what you're getting into when you own it, which brings me to my next issue, which is the communication failure here. Wow. So we're in a local news desert. So it's truly a travesty that people didn't know how this zoning code could personally affect you. And it's also a fail that they didn't get the letter in the mail. And I hope staff looks at changes in our policy and the way we do things so we can send letters to actually get to the people who are paying the property tax bill. I think it also points out another shortfall here, and that is that we have no petition process. You have to change the entire code because we don't allow a conditional use. Is that correct?
In this regard,
we don't allow use variances. In the code, we do allow conditional uses. Office uses are not considered a conditional use. They're either permitted or prohibited. So the code does have a third category for conditional uses. Offices are not defined as that. Conditional uses, by and large, are difficult to deny. So when you create a conditional use, you have to think of the conditions that you would place on it. So hours of operation, things of that nature. Offices really don't have abnormal hours of operation. So they're really more of a permitted or prohibited type of use category. So, but to your point, we don't allow use variances. So yes, you can't, one-off request, I want to be different than the district allows. The district would have to change. And that's what was petitioned by the applicant.
It just seems to really be, it doesn't seem like we have the release valve on the plan that we need. I had one other thought, but I can't find my notes, so.
Trustee McGovern, did you have any comments? And I do.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did remember. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I would just add,
Sorry, I get a senior moment on that one. I do think it is also telling that we have, residents who are saying, I don't want to live above a bar. And I think that's important to note going forward that, we have this MX district is a lot of real estate that we're thinking we're going to have, you know, bars and restaurants on the first floor and residential above, and it's something to think about. Thank you.
You know,
So, excuse me, trustee McGovern?
yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll just weigh in. I'm inclined to vote in favor of, you know, the change to make an exception here. I think that the conditional amendment is a reasonable compromise. I think there is really good arguments on both sides of this one. I don't think there's a really obviously correct answer. You know, there's good arguments for keeping it in place because, you know, the village has decided we want to encourage more active use and have, you know, more retail and try to activate that block. On the other hand, we've got this large site that's been vacant for 2 years, and we've got a, you know, a really good tenant that wants to move in. And I think it's good for the village also to be flexible and recognize the reality of what, you know, what people want to rent these buildings for. So, and then I do take it into account that, you know, we did get a lot of emails on this, you know, asking us to make this change. So I'm inclined to vote for it, even though I do think, you know, I understand good arguments for, you know, sticking with the code as it is, but I'm going to come down on the side of voting to make the change.
Trustee Arndorfer?
Yeah, I did not sit on the committee or the plan commission to see this through. I did attend a number of meetings, and I did have the pleasure of chairing the Weld and Woolley 4-3 vote that did lead to passage. So I do feel somewhat vested in the code as it is. That said, I do think the compromise that was crafted makes sense. You know, going back to, you know, a point that was made earlier, you know, we implement a code, we implement a policy, we learn and we move on. You know, and we have to be open to changing it, no matter how invested we were in the creation of it. And I think this is a good case of that. And as also noted, you know, we did make that commitment at the front end. So I don't think we're betraying any principles here or anything like that. And with the reality of some of the spaces that we do have, they could be hard to fill from a retail perspective. I mean, I eagerly await to see, you know, a new, you know, occupant at the former Chancery spot on, you know, Downer. It's only been, I don't know, 16 years or so. So, I mean, and, you know, I'd rather see a, you know, storefront office space in a defined area than an empty window. So that's why I would go forward on this one. Thank you.
All right, I had trustee Kudo with an additional comment. I see Barbara Kiley Miller with her hand up, and then Ms. Brostoff, I believe, wanted to have one more comment.
I actually good.
Okay. Commissioner Kiley Miller? If you could say your name and address, please.
Certainly. Barbara Kiley Miller, 4051 North Downer Avenue. As a member of the Plan Commission, I did serve on the working group when we crafted, along with the consultant and Bart, the new hybrid form-based zoning code. I think I counted up 13 meetings I sat in for that, and I can't tell you the number of times I reread that code. I would not take it at all or feel it was a waste of my time if we make this amendment. We had 2 robust discussions in the Plan Commission this month and last month about this, and what a benefit it would be to have a mental health provider in the village. And so I hope that you have in your packet what we had, the finances. Converting this office space to a retail space was really financially kind of a non-starter to get it back to a place where someone would want to come in. And the owner of the condo office space has been very active the last 2 years trying to rent it without success. And so by voting no, you know, we're going to penalize 2 elderly people who provided a lot to our community over the years. I think that Director Gruppentrog did a great job trying to craft a compromise. So we're not changing the code for every single commercial building in the commercial district, just these longer buildings that might have more difficulty. So I hope that you consider voting for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Final comment, Ms. Brostoff? Up to the microphone, please.
Ms. Stokbrand really made the point I wanted to make. This question of our knowledge of all this, of the zoning development. The Village of Shorewood knows that the official address of Vallis LLC, that's Valerie and Phyllis, that's how we came up with that name. Vallis LLC is 3431 North Lake Drive. And the notice was sent to 4485, which at the time it was actually empty, but all of the mail was forwarded to the former tenant, which I didn't even realize for several months. So I'm sorry, we certainly would have participated. And quite frankly, we would have been grandfathered in. I am running my own business. I'm still working as a consultant, as a social worker to elderly people and disabled adult families in need of my kind of expertise. And Vallis LLC, which also is a business, I would have just put my office in there and I could have continued to occupy it. I didn't know about the zoning code. If I was continuing to occupy it, this wouldn't have been brought to your attention at all. And I could have come in every day because I have a office, 2 businesses that I've been operating. So I'm sorry I understand your point and I understand, but I think that actually Ms. Stokbrand really made the point that I wanted to make, and also Ms. Kiley, that this is just a conflagration of different events and things, plus the marketplace, plus the ability to get money at very, very high interest rates and blah, 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 blah. So it's life, the universe, and everything. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Well, I think in summing, there are different ways to look at this. This could look as like we're making a personal exception for a specific person. I don't look at it like that. I think the situation brings up issues that challenge the theory behind the code, and also how we want to be as a village, as from a practical level to a visionary, and sometimes there's a gap. And there always has been in my experience in Shorewood, and this is no different. So I don't particularly see it as, there's a business that's going to benefit if this passes, or be negatively impacted if it doesn't pass, but it's really a set of conditions that seem reasonable. So with that, I would ask, this is going to be a roll call vote.
Need a motion.
Oh, yes. Would you like to make a motion?
I'm happy to. I'll just say that the motion that I would make would be for the third option, the conditional amendment. I think, as far as zoning is concerned, in general, communities are moving away from use-based zoning in general. We still have some use-based reasons, and there are reasons for that, and that makes sense here. But that is the future, is moving away from that, moving more towards form-based. The second thing I would make is this condition. While it does highlight certain buildings, the rest of the community is cut up into small parcels like this already. The MX district is actually broken up and all these kinds of things like that. So I don't have any concern with that. So that's the motion that I would make here.
So could you read that
I'm
into
happy
the
to
record?
I'm happy to just dive into here. Sorry. Okay. I motion to approve ordinance 3064, an ordinance to amend the regulations pertaining to principal uses permitted in the MX districts as detailed in 535-25 of the zoning code, subject to including the following conditions: that office uses within the first 20 feet of occupied space in the MX district, 1, shall not be located along the primary facade within 60 feet from a street corner measured from the corner of the building, and 2, only be permitted in buildings with at least 120 linear feet of primary frontage, and 3, so long as those total uses, not including a lobby, occupy no more than 90 linear feet or 50% of the frontage along the primary facade, whichever is less.
Second.
All right, we have a first by trustee Lynn and a second by trustee Arndorfer. Further discussion, although we've had a lot. Trustee Ursink?
I kind of feel like this really highlights the need for exploring more economic development opportunities with our bid and helping and really talking to the bid about attraction, business attraction, and trying to make this more of a reality. So if we really want this retail, we have to figure out solutions in order to help the business owners, get to the point where they can rent it out as retail. Because right now it's not there. And
Right.
we need to, if we want this thing to succeed, we need to figure out a way that we can help them as a community succeed in that direction, because if we can't, it's not going to happen.
Good point. That was brought up in the presentation, is that in many, like behind retail, there are often other factors at play, whether it's TIF participation, whether it's a grant program that the Business Improvement District runs, whether it's something from the CDA. And back when I started on the board, there was a loan program, and they did look at white box things. So those are not options for us now. So thank you for raising that, because that was one point that we glossed over. All right. Hearing nothing else, this will be a roll call vote.
Trustee McGovern,
Yes.
trustee Lynn,
Aye.
trustee Stokbrand,
Aye.
trustee Arndorfer,
Aye.
trustee Kudo,
No.
President McKay,
Aye.
trustee Ursink.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-1.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Stay dry. Okay, moving on. We're going to go back to 9A, consider resolution 2024-09, a resolution regarding the Wisconsin DNR NR 208 2023 compliance maintenance annual report. Is there a motion? Or any questions? This comes to us. It's an annual item, pretty straightforward in the packet. Hopefully everybody's reviewed.
I move approval of resolution 2024-09, a resolution regarding the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources NR 208 2020 compliance maintenance annual report.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, this will be a roll call vote.
Trustee Ursink,
Yes.
trustee Kudo,
Yes.
President McKay,
Yes.
trustee McGovern,
Yes.
trustee Arndorfer,
Aye.
trustee Lynn,
Aye.
trustee Stokbrand.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. Moving on to 9C, consider policy 47, Friends Groups contributions. This comes to us from Community Business Relations with a recommendation to approve. Trustee Kudo, would you like to summarize or make a motion at this time?
I would love to make a motion.
Great.
I'm assuming everyone has read it. The summary, I believe, is sufficient. So once I can find this motion, I move to approve policy 47, Friends Group contributions.
Second.
All right, any discussion? I just want to thank you very much for working on this. This has been a long-standing item in development and much needed.
It was fun.
Mhm.
We went back and forth, had good conversations.
Yeah.
Good. All right, this will be just a regular voice vote. So all those in favor say aye.
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 All right, motion carries unanimously. With that, it concludes new business. We move on to item 10, report of village officials, village president. Happy Pride Month, everyone. And also, I believe we're going to have a volunteer effort to participate in the Juneteenth parade. Watch for information coming soon. There's a volunteer group that got a grant from the Shord Foundation for t-shirts and a banner. Other village trustees, trustee Stokbrand.
Yeah, I would remind everyone to go to the Atwater Parks site circulation plan. It'll also be reviewing the Shorewood Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan and the Shorewood Pedestrian and Bicycle Master Plan. That's this Thursday, June 6th, from 5 to 6:30 p.m. in the lower level of the Village Center. To review and update, look at possible recommendations regarding these planning efforts. So it's a lot of things that are really important in the community, and I hope the turnout is as good as the first one. And thank you to planning staff.
Who's going to bed? Trustee Kudo?
I just confirmed earlier with Clerk Carroll that we are again this year raising the Juneteenth flag.
Yes.
And so I was able to make it. President McKeag last year, and it was beautiful. And I don't have any details on it at all yet.
So,
but
yes.
I'm excited for it.
So the flag, thank you. I'm so sorry we didn't put this on it, but I kind of dropped the ball. But we were slipping in the butter last week. So anyway, we'll be raising the flag on July 18th because we're closed on the 19th. June.
That's awkward. Yeah, that'd be weird, right?
What?
July.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
1 month late.
Yeah, that would be really awkward. Okay, June
That would be a
18th.
huge story.
Clerk Carroll
Sherwood does it
will
again.
sing again, has committed to singing. So we will be circulating information about that. And then at that time, people can pick up their T-shirts if they want to be in the parade the next morning, and we'll give out, this is a volunteer effort, and we're coordinating it the best we can. We've got a ragtag group.
So it's an early morning gig, right?
It is 9 a.m. step off.
No, but I mean the flag raising.
Flag raising was in the morning last year. But
At 8,
what? I'm sorry?
8 a.m.
It was right before 8 a.m. This year there will be an added little treat. There will be a group from the Civil War reenactment group. And there's also going to be members of the United States Colored Guard that will be there. And also someone who will be reading the third order from Lieutenant Granger before I sing.
It's all at City Hall, all at Village Hall.
Correct.
You did.
Yeah.
Bring your lawn chair.
Bring your
It
lunch.
will be- I mean,
It's gonna be very beautiful. I
Thank
might
you.
cry.
Mhm. Fair enough. Oh, yes.
It's really hard to follow that up, but I think
What do you have?
I think the day before that is the first day of the farmers market. That's Sunday. So Sunday, I think it's June 16th.
Mhm.
So the farmers market will start in Estherbrook, and we just get bigger and bigger. We'll have quite a few more vendors this year, and it's going to be another fantastic year at the farmers market.
That's great. And we'll have the Juneteenth proclamation at the next board meeting. Sorry. Yeah, it's another thing. All right. Anybody else with reports? All right, hearing none, village manager. No report. No future items of consideration this evening. That moves us to item 12, which is closed session. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
Can I just ask for like a 2-minute bio break? I've been in this chair for over 3.5 hours.
Fair. So before we,
I just need to stand up.
Oh, we're just waiting a motion though to go to closed session.
I'm a second in the
Okay.
You want me to read it?
yes,
Yes,
please.
we have to read
We'll
it.
take care of it while you guys go to the bathroom.
I move that we adjourn into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute section 19.851E for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the investing of public funds or conducting other specified business where a competitive or bargaining reason requires a closed session to discuss contract negotiation associated with lead service line replacement and related infrastructure work.
Second.
All right, this will be a roll call vote.
Trustee McGovern,
Yes.
trustee Lynn, trustee Ursink,
Aye.
President McKeag,
Yes.
trustee Stokebrand,
Aye.
trustee Arndorfer,
Aye.
trustee Kudo.
He said yes.
Motion carries.
Right there.
7-0.
Yep. Yeah.
I really did, yeah.
Lower.
Or
Oh, and trustee McGovern? Yes, okay, great.
Yes.
All right. And thank you, trustee McGovern. I know it's getting really late there. This was a long
Yeah.
meeting. Yeah, you can go out to the clubs.
When you start to go out.
Yeah, it's normal.
How do you know I'm not already at the club?
There you go, we don't.
It's too quiet.
Good one.
I'm
He's
just
on
gonna
mute.
pause the recording.
and I move to adjourn from open session.
Second.
Wait. Okay.
Any objections? We stand adjourned at 10:17.
Thank you.
Well, I was gonna go home and tell Nadine all about this.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, hey.
Haley's been waiting at home just to hear about this.